why don't we just jump right into it? Give me an introduction to yourself and where you're born. We're gonna roll right into it.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, grew up in a small town called Larkspur, which is, I mean, like real small, but it's close enough to.
Where's it located?
It's in between Denver and Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay. So do you know where Lyman is?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time out there.
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
So yeah, grew up out there, and was always flying airplanes. Just my dad was a pilot.
Okay.
Grandparents pilots, so it was always around aviation. So it's
Okay.
kind of like, all right, pretty sure I want to end up flying planes. So,
Were they doing like a lot of crop dusting out there? What type of flying are they doing?
well, so my dad was he was a civilian his whole career.
Okay.
And then he was an airline guy.
Okay.
And then grandparents, one flew military, the other civilian.
So it was destined. It's in your blood.
Yeah, I knew
Okay.
I was going to be flying something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, childhood, you're in and around planes quite a bit, so that obviously sparked the interest. Did you know immediately that you wanted to go military route, or you just wanted to fly in general?
I was mostly just I want to go fly something. I want to fly aircraft and I look back at it and I'm like, I really didn't have these like incredible goals. It was like, just go fly airplanes, cool, figure it out.
Yeah.
And military was always on my mind. Oh yeah, cool, I'll go fly in the military. Just from minimal exposure around. We didn't have like any. The Air Force Academy was close, but didn't really. That's just a school. But so in terms of actual bases, though, around there isn't too much.
Yep.
And so I wasn't able to really see too much of the Air Force bases, and so I was like, well, whatever, that would be neat, but let's just keep going with the track of just flying airplanes. So
Yeah.
Eventually, graduate high school, go on to college again. Just hey, cool, go get aeronautical science degree and go fly, and get all my civilian flight ratings,
Okay.
and finish up, graduate college in 2001, like May 2001.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm now on my track. I'm going to, just going to go fly civilian. Maybe
Yeah.
don't know what I'm going to do yet. Probably
You just gotta start logging
end
hours.
up in the airlines eventually.
Okay.
That's kind of what I figured. Well, sure enough, something else happens in 2001.
Okay.
September 11th rolls
Yep.
around, and that then gives a whole different perspective on things.
Okay.
And so at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm just out of college. I know how to fly airplanes, and just like probably most guys in our generation at that point, like the lines of people to go, join the military on like September 12th.
Yep.
And so, I was at that point for me, it was like, okay, holy cow, I've got to get into this fight.
So it changed everything for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And again, I've always thought the military was awesome. I just didn't know that much about the flying stuff, and really what all it took. So now I'm a little behind the eight ball in terms of, it's time to join. I'm already done with college.
Yep.
I'm kind of on a career progression somewhat, thinking I am at least. And so then it's like, well, I want to fly, and I want to fly in the military. And so then, getting into that rabbit hole of, okay, all the different ways that there are.
Because now you already have your degree.
Yep, have a degree.
So you've skipped that process of going the
ROTC route, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so really you looking at the different options you have, and it's actually pretty interesting. There are a lot of different paths to get into military aviation.
You're talking just all the different branches and what each one
branches
offers?
and yeah, the different branches and then just the different paths to get into the different services as well.
Okay.
So, Army, obviously you can be warrant officer, you can be an officer, and then you can fly helicopters, whatever. But just on the Air Force side, when you look at it, there's the path of being in college, being ROTC, or go to a service academy, Air Force Academy type thing, where you're commissioned right after graduation, and then you go in, and then you start flying. You could also do that really anytime after you graduate as well. You could just join the Air Force, and now you're giving them a 10-year commitment.
Oh,
And,
okay. Okay.
And then I also had heard of, you can just join on Air National Guard or the Air Reserves, Air Force Reserves. And I was like, ooh, well, that actually sounds pretty interesting. And we had a family friend who was flying in the New Mexico Guard. And he was like, hey, this is actually a really good deal. You can, you're full-time for the first few years as you get spun up. And then you can be what's called a traditional guardsman, where you can fly in the military, and then you can also have a civilian job on the side.
That's nice.
Oh, well, now that sounds really cool.
Okay.
And I was like, man, maybe I should start pursuing that. And so again, this is, 2001, and I was like, cool. Well, I'll go join the Guard, and thinking, all right, 2001, probably get hired, go to pilot training, rock and roll. I'll be in the fight in like 6 months, a year. Very ignorant. Don't know how it really works at that point. Well, so joining the Air National Guard or getting hired as a pilot in the Guard is a pretty in-depth process.
How so?
Well, if you have to have your application packet ready to go before you'll get interviewed.
Oh, okay.
So you have to go through all the like the AFOQT, with the Air Force Officers Qualification Test, the BAT test, which is like a hand-eye coordination test, and you first you have to get somebody who'll let you even take that test, because you go to a recruiter, and most recruiters are like, well, we just want you to just enlist, or just just go do this. But for them to go through the whole process of getting you all these tests and go through all the paperwork, and then now they might not even see you again. So anyway, so figuring that whole thing out, and then to see which Air National Guard units are hiring, you have to reach out. This is kind of, 2001, obviously internet's around, but it's not it wasn't as easy as it is now to just do a quick search. And so you're really hunting down each Guard unit. And
you personally?
Yeah, personally, you have to hunt down every Guard unit that you think you'd want to go to.
Really?
Yeah. So every state pretty much has an Air National Guard flying unit.
Yep.
And then some of them they're going to fly C-17s, KC-135s, C-130s, and then all the fighters as well, or most of the fighters are in the Guard. So really, you got to reach out to those squadrons or to those units and say, hey, when are you guys hiring? And
interesting.
And you're going to hear, yes, hey, we are. We're doing our interview board, in June. You're like, okay, great. And then you submit your packet to them.
Is this like a once a year thing that they do?
It is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they do their interviews once a year.
Damn. So you got to have everything together. If you're trying to fast track it like you are, like you're ready to rock and
you've
roll.
got it. And to have that packet of every unit's going to be a little bit different of what they require. Some of them are like, hey, we actually want you to have your full like medical, an Air Force flight medical. And, well, how the hell am I supposed to do that? And it's a lot of it's attention to detail. So you're really following what they want you to have, and then getting your packet in on time, and then
this is like a legit job interview. It seems more civilian.
It is
structured than it is military. Where it's like, get in line, here you go, sign this paper, go through a class, and see if you make it.
Right? Yeah, it is. It's a lot different.
You're legit trying to
get hired as a job.
Into the military.
And the Guard is very. There's a lot of similarities to active duty flying, and then there's a lot of differences. One of the main differences when you're hired at an Air National Guard unit, you are there for life. In theory, you could be, hey, I'm hired at the Idaho Air National Guard. You can stay there forever.
You can do your whole career there.
Unlike active duty, as you know, you're at the whims
needs of the Corps.
Yeah, they're like, hey. Guess what? You're going here. You're going here. You're going here. Oh, okay, and so it's one thing. It's one aspect that's really awesome about the Guard, but it makes it the barrier to entry is a lot harder, because they don't want to bring you on unless because they're like, dude, we're bringing this guy on for life. And if we don't like him, it's really tough to get you out.
I never thought of that. That's
So
how they do
yeah,
that.
and so when they hire, and the way the Air National Guard hires, they bring in every year. They're going to hire a guy. Not every year, but most of the time, they're going to bring in one, maybe two guys from active duty.
Okay.
Maybe like a captain or a major, and then they need new blood as well. So they're going to hire one guy off the street to be as a lieutenant.
That's it.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll hire two.
What's the application percent? I mean, are you talking hundreds of guys applying for this, or is it like
all the fighter squadrons, they're going to see in that range of like 80 to 120.
And maybe one or two guys are going to get picked
you get
for this?
one or two that
Really?
they hire. And so I just, it's like, okay, I'm single at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really didn't care where I lived. And I just said, look, I really want to fly fighter or attack aircraft.
So you knew.
Yeah.
Going into it.
Yeah, that's what
you
at
least wanted
that's
that.
what I really that's what I was really going for. And so I called all those squadrons, found out their applications, and sent out the packets to all of those. And so now we're into 2002 in the summer is kind of when I started interviewing. They call it rushing, whatever. And in that first summer, on your own dime, you're flying to these units.
Okay, so you're technically not in the Air Force yet.
Correct. Not in
You're
the Air Force.
still civilian applying to try to get a job in the Air Force.
Yep.
This is so weird coming.
I know.
This is so opposite of everything I've ever learned.
It really is. And so, and I'm learning as I'm going,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, now I guess I'm buying a ticket to St. Louis to interview with the St. Louis Guard.
Really?
This is so weird. So you're like, all right, well, whatever. This is the way it is.
Yeah.
And so I make in 2002. I'm making the rounds, go interview all over the place. And I was happy to at least get an interview because out of 100 applicants to at least get an interview, you feeling good.
How many did you shock and blast out to? I mean, you remember?
Like all the fighter squadrons.
Okay.
And in the country. Which,
so you went all.
So you're and then out of all of those, and again, I would say maybe. I couldn't tell you how many states have fighter squadrons.
Okay.
Maybe 20.
Okay.
And then the rest, it's like heavy units.
And then out of the 20, how many gave you the callback?
I had that first year. I had like eight or nine interviews.
Okay.
And so they're going to interview maybe 10 or 15 guys out of that they kind of narrow down out of the packets. So go around, interview, get the thumbs down from everybody. I'm like, oh shit, okay, that sucks, but good experience. And so now I'm just continuing along, flying, just doing some like little cargo flying jobs and whatnot, flying out of Denver and just continue, press along. Like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. But at the same time, now a war is like really starting to pick up and rage in Afghanistan. 2002, 2003. Shit. Okay, I really need to get rolling here. This kind of just, keep going. Keep interviewing. Well, it takes 3 years of interviewing.
No kidding.
And
good for you for not quitting on that.
Well, and in hindsight, it would have been easier just to go active duty, probably. But I was, I started down that path of the Guard, and really happy, the way it turned out. But I finally get hired. Again, I'm shotgunning packets everywhere and all over the country. I don't really care. Yep. It was just fighter attack aircraft.
Yeah.
And I end up getting hired in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
And I have no connection to that town, but they picked me up to go and get hired. They were flying F-16s at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was like, dude, awesome, this is great. And so that's where I first started. We get hired there.
So you see these videos of these guys graduating Air Force, I guess flight school, then they get like assigned their position. You got to skip all that, and so you were like, okay, this is what's presented to me. I'm taking it, and that was F-16s right out the gate.
Right.
What'd you think of that? I mean, obviously that's a pretty badass jet. So, I mean, that was probably, was that a sigh of relief, or what were you hoping for F-16s? I mean, I know you wanted fighter or attack. What was you, if you would have had your dream, what would it have been?
Well, so honestly, I was a little ignorant to, I mean, I knew what obviously all these airframes did and what their mission was, but, it was just like, I don't care. I was like, I think A-10s are awesome. F-16s are awesome.
You just wanted it.
They were all great, and so, I didn't intimately know like what they were doing in terms of, it's like, oh, cool. Yeah. Obviously I know F-15s are in air to air platform and A-10s are air to ground mostly. Yep. And so it's like, well, but I was fine with whatever. And then, but once I went to pilot training, you really get, when you're talking to the pilots and, all these guys that flew those, and then you really find out what's what. But again, I was happy with F-16.
So F-16 training school. I mean, you show up. I mean, you're going from like these commercial cargo planes, and then now all of a sudden, it's happening. I mean, what's the feeling and thought going through your mind at that point?
Yeah, well, and I mean, kind of to back up too. I mean, once you're hired, you're like, okay, cool, hired. Well, now you're in the pipeline, they call it, and now you're in. Coming off as a civilian. Well, now I got to go get commissioned. And then and then that's where the line of, okay, I'm in the Air National Guard versus active duty. Now you're just basically during the training pipeline, it's all the same.
Okay.
And I go to Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma, Enid, Oklahoma, for Air Force pilot training, and it was actually a joint pilot training base at the time. So we had Navy pilots and Air Force pilots. And so you show up day one, and really I knew I was hired to fly the F-16, but you still get rack and stacked with all your active duty bros in the class.
Oh, okay.
And if you're not making the cuts at every all the checks, basically, they're either going to just say, hey, you're done, or, hey, you're doing okay, but not good enough to go fly fighters, so you need to go find a C-130 unit or something.
What would wash you out of this program? I mean, what are they looking for?
I mean, Air Force pilot training in general, they do a really good job of screening because it's very expensive, right, for the taxpayer.
I would imagine, for sure.
And so they don't want to send somebody there who's not going to make it through pilot training. But what they can't determine is if you should go be a fighter pilot or not. That's a really hard thing to hire.
What separates the difference between an AC-130 and an F-16 pilot? What's the when you hit that Y in the road?
Yeah, and that's one thing. I mean, like the Air National Guard, when they're hiring, they have a really hard time picking a guy off the street to go be a fighter pilot. Like, because there's nothing that says, like, okay, if you can be, if he has this, and this, he will come back to you as a fighter pilot. And there was a huge issue for a while in the Air National Guard. I think it still exists of some of these squadrons. They were having like they went like 5 years of hiring, and all their guys for the 5 years in a row were washing out somewhere in the process. And it's because it's really hard to determine what makes a good fighter pilot. You can, but again, the Air Force does a really good job of saying, look, if you do well enough on these certain tests, we know we can get you through just Air Force pilot training.
Okay. We
can't guarantee that you're going to go be an F-22 pilot, but maybe you're great at flying a KC-135 tanker pilot. And so the first part of Air Force pilot training, you're in it's called a T-6 Texan, and it's a single engine turboprop. And you're just it's your basic, like, hey, this is how to take off, land, fly the Air Force patterns. They call instrument flying, and then once you're finished with that phase is when they really that's the first cut, really, where they say, okay, these individuals, you're going to go fly fighter bomber route. These individuals, you're going to go fly cargo or tanker route.
But how are they deciding that? Is it reaction? Is it I mean, obviously they're watching and testing everything. Is it just come down to the individual, do you think? Or, I mean, are these guys that involved in the whole process that they're watching? Like, I mean, what separates from you going to be a tanker versus an F-16?
Well, I think overlying thing is the needs of the Air Force. You
Of
know,
course.
sometimes there'd be like hey, we don't need any fighter guys. Like, luckily that hasn't been the case for quite a while.
Okay.
They've needed fighter guys really heavily for a while, but you know, if you're doing guys who do really well on their check rides or didn't have problems getting through,
Okay.
they're like, okay, we're pretty confident that you're going to make it through the next couple phases. So, but then they'll even so that gives you that breaks it down into saying, okay, yeah, you could go fly the fighter attack / and bomber route. So all of us, you move to the next aircraft, which is the T-38. And then if you're going to go fly heavies and cargo, you go fly a T-1, which is kind of like a small little business jet.
Okay.
And you learn to fly, more, and it's catered more to what the cargo.
Maneuverable wise and all that, so
Right.
they don't need something that's going to be much
Right,
quicker.
and then the T-38, that's that's the plane they used in the first Top Gun as the the MiG-28s. They call them. They were all the black Russian MiGs, and
What was that like?
so
I mean,
that's
moving
incredible.
up?
I loved that airplane. The T-38 that was so much fun.
What was it like getting? So it's a 2-man then, right?
Yep, yeah. You always have an instructor.
So
in the back.
what's it like? I mean, do you remember the first time getting in it and rolling down the runway, getting ready
Yeah,
to take off?
I mean it's not like a blow your socks off crazy fighter, but it's still a trainer, and so but it's got 2 afterburners, supersonic. It's and it's a difficult aircraft to fly. The T-38, it's really old. It was built in the 50s or something.
Okay.
And they're finally replacing it now. And it has a really thin wing on it that makes its stall characteristics are just terrible. And so like on a normal airplane, if you get slow, that's when airplanes start to stall. They're just not getting the airflow over the wings. And most airplanes are designed to be have a pretty benign stall. So when stall, okay, cool, you get a little shudder and you recover. Well, the T-38, it would you're constantly in a near death situation of stall when you're coming into land on the final turn.
Okay.
It sounds like there's mice dancing on the wings. You'd hear this and that's kind of
Really?
you're close to stall. But then the second you hear elephants on the wing, dude, the
Throttle
thing's
up a
about
little
to,
bit.
the thing's, and it won't just stall. It'll stall, spin, gone.
Just immediate.
And yeah, and so unfortunately they've lost a lot of guys in T-38s throughout the years because it is a tough airplane. And
Is that why you think they do that? Because if you learn to fly something right out the gate,
I
guess-
think it's just, the aircraft, it's just, I would honestly, it's probably a design flaw.
Okay.
Honestly, it's built in the 50s.
Yeah.
You're going to see aircraft today that would just, they're a lot more forgiving.
Yeah.
But it's great time. A lot of fun to fly again. It's, you're hauling ash, doing low levels. And so it was so once you finish that, when you finish T-38s, then that's you have what's called the drop night. And drop night is, at the club, and they'll show a picture on the screen.
So
hey, this
you
is what
don't
airplane
know
we're going.
what you're actually getting picked yet for, though, correct?
Right. Well, since I'm hired to go fly an F-16, it's pretty much once I made it into the T-38, it was as long as I don't, screw up in 38s.
Yep.
And then in the follow-on, there's a couple other follow-on courses. That's the aircraft I'm going to go to.
Okay. But for the
Now-
normal enlisted guys,
Yeah.
it's
So
the different route.
if you're just and if you're in active duty, drop night's a pretty big night. And
I've seen some videos of it. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, guys, emotions are high and everyone's freaking out because that's going to tell them, hey, they're going to be flying a B-52 because that's in the 38 it's back to you're going to be flying either a bomber or a fighter.
Okay.
And so some guys they want to be a general. That's their whole goal, and they got to get into an F-22, and that's their thing. And they think their whole life is over if they get a B-1 or something.
Okay.
So or some people just have, huge dreams and ambitions of flying a certain airframe.
Is there a plane in the fleet that nobody wants to fly? Is there just that one that people are like, oh God, I got stuck on this?
I'm sure there is. I think it would probably.
What would be yours?
I think a lot of guys would say on the heavy side would probably be like an AWACS.
What's an AWACS?
That's the aircraft that looks like it has a giant frisbee on the top of it.
Oh, the control center one.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Because they're really just taking off and making big circles
Okay.
while you're in a big heavy airplane.
Okay.
So,
I can see.
I don't think people would really say, "Hey, raise their hand and say."
You're not jumping for joy when that picture pops up on your night.
And then, but what's amazing though too is there are guys like the diehard A-10 guys too. Guys who are like, I really want A-10s. I want them bad. And that was first time too when I was in pilot training. I was like, man, that's, you're starting to talk to some of the pilots that came back from the war. Now they're flying T-38s, for their other assignment. Mm-hmm. You find out like, holy shit, like the Hog is a badass airplane. And so there were a lot of guys really, wanting.
It's such an iconic plane.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's the most recognizable plane I think in the sky.
Yeah. And that really too, that was the time where I first went, that would be an incredible airplane to fly. Of course, I was slated for Vipers. Like, cool, fine. I had no problem with that. But
I mean, it's still a pretty badass plane.
Yeah.
So as you're moving up in training and then finally getting to the F-16, could I compare that to moving up in like a supercar? You're going from Ferrari to a Bugatti. Is that how it kind of feels in military terms? I mean, because you're going from a plane. I mean, obviously the F-16s are pretty ancient too. I mean, it's most of the majority of, I feel like, our fleet is pretty historic. But as you're moving from these training planes, you're getting more G-force, more maneuverability out of these planes. Is it like, can you compare that to moving up in like a supercar?
Yeah, I mean that is a good analogy because you really like the T-6, like I mentioned, the one you first start in. Yeah, that'd be now you're in just like an older Mustang or something. You know, it's a good it's a good airplane, but it's nothing crazy.
Yep.
And then the 38 maybe keep comparing better cars.
Yeah. So the F-16, you finally get chose, or you get yours that night. I mean, you kind of knew it was coming.
Yeah.
How was that? I mean, was it a pretty cool feeling getting in it for the first time?
Yeah, that was awesome. And I'll tell you, because it's a long way just to get there. I mean, Air Force pilot training, that's a year long. Mm-hmm. And then once you're complete with Air Force pilot training, you're winged now and you're feeling good. That's you graduate with T-38s. Well, then you have to go to a course called IFF, which is Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals. And it's really where I think it has the highest washout rate for sure.
Really?
In the whole pipeline.
Really?
And because that's where they're really looking to see, like, hey, can we send this individual to go fly a $20 million airplane by himself, and can he do exactly what is being asked of him? And so,
which is a huge ask.
It is, and they need to find out: are you going to be able to not just fly a fighter, which isn't that difficult, but to employ a fighter aircraft as a weapon, and that's what's very difficult to do. And so,
why? I mean, obviously, I know but why is it so much more difficult?
Well, so modern day fighters are really designed to be easy to fly. We'll put it that way, because I mean, I've put my kid, he was like 7 and he was flying the A-10 sim like day 0, no problem.
Okay.
And stick and rudder, you can fly it. Mm-hmm. But then if I was to ask him, hey, now go strafe something, like, no way.
Okay.
And there's so much going on, and especially when you're single seat. I mean, it is information overload. There's so much happening that IFF really weeds out the guy who's unable to just do the, we call it admin, which is kind of your basic, like, hey, get out there, get into the fight and get back without screwing anything up. And so they'd wash guys out for things that you'd think, you're looking at it, you're like, that's so ridiculous. How did I hook the ride? We call it a hook because it's a U and unsat. And so if you do an unsat on the ride, then
what is that?
Means you screwed something up.
Okay.
You failed the ride.
Okay.
You failed the flight. So you'd land, a typical sortie, you brief it up, you go fly it, you debrief, they watch all your tapes, everything's recorded, from your HUD. And
you're on your own on these. So this isn't a simulation. This
right.
is, you're actually planning a mission to go out, you're running it and coming back, and they're watching every single move.
So you're always going to be number 2 or number 2 or 4 in a 4-ship. This is all during that IFF course.
Okay.
And you're in the T-38. And so a basic story, there's an air-to-air phase and an air-to-ground phase, and they're not getting crazy into the tactics because that's not what it's about. It's really the admin, making sure you're exactly where you need to be in formation, making sure you're doing things exactly on time, and being where you're supposed to be when you're briefed. And if you're messing things up like that, then they're like, well, if you can't do this, you definitely can't do the next thing. And
so they're wanting to see if you can follow, when I say simplest tasks for a fighter pilot. So they want you hitting all those checks on time.
Yeah.
And so every time you're either ahead or late, those are just dings for you.
Yeah. And if you screw up something wholesale, and you have an instructor in the back seat, and worst case, they're seeing you just do unsafe things.
Okay.
Things that are just unsafe. Like, dude, you're gone. You can't go fly a single seat fighter if you're even remotely unsafe. So, okay, cool. And so getting through IFF was, we were all, and that was a time too when there was a super high washout rate during that program. We were all really happy to get through that. And it's like a 2-month course.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So when I finished that and it's like graduated, I'm done. I'm finally out of Enid, Oklahoma, which, small town, middle of,
It's just Oklahoma.
Yeah. It's cold winter. You're like, oh my gosh. Well, then I get to go to Luke Air Force Base down in Phoenix for the RTU, the basic course, the B course, basic course in the F-16. And so that was like everything about it was just a great time in my life.
Why?
Sure.
Well, obviously you're in Phoenix, and
yeah,
Phoenix is awesome, especially probably being a young single. I don't know if you're single at this time.
Yeah, still single.
So being in Phoenix doesn't suck.
I was driving a 1973 Ford Bronco with the top off. We're driving in the deserts on the weekends, going to hanging out in Scottsdale, and we had the class I was with, great group of guys, and our instructors, the fighter squadron I was in down there. We had just had amazing instructors, great leadership, all that matters so much.
Oh, for sure.
And then of course getting to actually get to fly an F-16 was great.
Yeah.
So
that's your first time you're actually getting hands on an F-16.
Yep. Yeah. That's the first time. So that's
okay.
And they call it the B course, which is the basic course, which is 9 months long.
Not your basic course, 9 months.
Yep.
How much of a difference from going from with the T-38 to an F-16? You have a plane that was built in the 50s. When were the 16s brought in?
Yeah, they're like 1980s-ish technology.
So how much of a difference are you learning that cockpit, I guess? Was it drastic going from a training?
It is for sure. The F-16, it's a great airplane, and really for 1980s technology. So it's all fly-by-wire, and they used to say, it has a side stick that barely moves, and they say when you're moving that stick, you're voting. You're one of the, and if you say, hey, I want the aircraft to go up, I'm going to pull the stick back. Well, now you're telling the computer, hey, I want to do this. Well, the computer's also has a say in that, because
really,
yeah, and the flight controls are so. With this fly-by-wire system, it's not old hydraulic lines like in the T-38, where in the T-38, if you yank on that stick as hard as you want, you can stall out, rip the wing, whatever you're going to do. Well, in an F-16, it really protects you from that.
Oh,
and so
okay.
it wants to stay in control as much as possible.
So it almost fights you in a way.
Yeah. So sometimes when you can go full aft stick, and it's going to say, like for instance, one air-to-air engagement you do in an F-16 during training called a high aspect, and that's where you start where you're a few miles apart, facing right at each other, and the fight starts right as you cross each other. Well, the standard thing is the second you cross, you yank back as hard as you can, and then that's when the fight begins.
Okay.
And well, in F-16, you can just go boom, full aft, and that the computer is just going to go boom. We're going to move this thing right to 9 Gs. It's maximum amount of maneuverability.
No shit.
Versus like, other aircraft, the T-38, A-10s. If you have to really control how much over G. You could just rip the wings off.
But in the 16, it's just...
At 16, boom, and that stick moves like a quarter of an inch back, and now it's just going boom, and you're stuck now. And that thing's just going to rake it right to 9 Gs, which is pretty. Shit. It's pretty incredible.
That was so that was one of the questions that a lot of people asked. Explaining G-force. They want to know like true G-force, and have you ever blacked? Okay, so there's kind of 3 questions I had multiple questions of. Have you ever come close to blacking out or blacking out during G-force training or flying? Are some people more susceptible to just G's? It doesn't bother them than others. Is that a thing?
Yeah, so that's good questions there. So really, and that's back into the pilot training pipeline.
Okay.
You have to go to the centrifuge, and you can where they just spin you. And there's really funny videos on YouTube.
Okay, so
of that.
I feel like I'm good with anything. You want to absolute torture me? That contraption is it.
It is. It's pretty painful, and really you go through you actually have to do it twice. You have to do it before you go to T-38s, and I think that G profile they have to see that you can get to like 7 Gs or whatever, and then to move on to F-16. Now you got to go back, and they spin you to 9 Gs, and you have to do it from different, like the check 6 where you're looking over your shoulder. Just hunkering down hard, and they have a little camera right in front of you, and so, and that's pretty stressful because you don't know, like, how's my body gonna react to this? They tell you there's certain things you can do, a lot of leg workouts. You can, if you have higher blood pressure, that actually helps. So if you're, kind of like who's susceptible to G-lock, it's really like lanky, long, lanky runners. I mean,
it doesn't affect them.
No, they are going to G-lock quick.
G-lock's passing out when you hit your.
Yeah, so a G-lock is you passed out.
So the taller, lankier guys get it the worst.
Because really, what's happening is all that blood is flowing out of your head, and it's pooling in your legs.
Is that why they tell you to flex?
Yeah,
and do this
so you
weird
wear a G suit, which is they look like. You just strap them over your legs, plug into a hose, and then it fills up with air when you pull G's because it's really wants to contract your they're like just like chaps basically.
Okay.
So in the aircraft, that's what you get to wear, and it also squeezes around your abdomen.
Okay.
I mean, I'm short, stocky dude, and back then too, when I was like, you're thicker, bigger, and so G's just really didn't bother me at that point.
Really?
Yeah, short, stocky dudes.
So it definitely affects certain people.
Yeah, who are out eating cheeseburgers all day are going to actually do a lot better.
Really?
Than the tall, lanky guys. They're the ones that you see G-lock a lot.
Okay. So when you feel that, what's it feel like? I guess that was the third part of that question. Is it just weight? It feel like an elephant on your chest? Because you see these videos and the dude's faces are just sucked back and.
Yeah, so it's pretty much so a G is a gravitational force is what they call it. So when you're under G, you're under even when you're on an airliner and they rotate, you can feel you're now at like 1.5 Gs.
So when you're taking off on a commercial airline?
Yeah, that's like 1.5.
Okay.
Like right now we're sitting here, we're at 1 G.
Okay.
Where you just kind of barely on an airline, you just kind of feel that sinking. Well, and so if like your, if your arm or something weighs 10 pounds, Well, under 2 Gs, it's going to weigh 20 pounds.
So
And under 9 Gs, that's going to weigh 90 pounds. You know, so it's just,
shit.
and so, so all that pressure, you know, is what it can actually, it can be painful for sure, especially like 9 Gs. And that's where you're seeing like capillaries start bursting on your arms and under your legs. And they call them, they call them, you can get what's called Geasels.
Geasels?
Yeah, because it's where it's like little bumps from all those capillaries like blowing up under your legs and under your arms.
Shit.
So to answer some of those questions, like I've never G-locked, and if you do, that's a really big deal to G-lock when you're flying.
When you're flying, not during the test.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
often does that happen?
They've with new advancements in the aircraft, like in the F-16, since I've left, there's a new feature in there to where it'll actually self-recover the aircraft, and
it goes autopilot, huh?
It'll just know like, hey, something's not right, and then it'll pull the nose up, and that's like saved dudes' asses already a bunch because
really,
you know, we had a guy when I was down there at Luke, he was in a different squadron than us, and you know, he G-locked on and packed it in, and
no kidding.
And so it does happen, and there's, you know, you hear a lot of you know, they'll play tapes, you know, of guys G-locking and barely recovering, or you know, worst case packing it all the way in.
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
Yeah.
That's insane. Do G's feel different in the simulator than they do in a plane?
They do, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the centrifuge, it does a pretty good job, but for some reason, the centrifuge, it doesn't feel the same.
It's just more of whipping you when
Right.
you're actually pulling.
Yeah, you're just getting like just stuck to to the back.
Okay.
Is what it feels like, because that's all it's doing. It's just spinning.
No kidding.
The centrifuge.
So now you're making it, and you're flying.
Yep.
Did you deploy it all with an F-16, or are you all stateside with it?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to deploy. So you know, B course 9 months down there at Luke, and then I go back. So now I'm like, okay, I'm done. It's like, holy shit. After you know, just all the whole training pipeline is over 2 years.
Okay.
Of to where you start, you know, civilian dipshit to now flying the F-16s.
Yep.
You know, it's over 2 years long. And you know, between courses and everything like that, you know, I get to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to start flying. Well, now you have to take another course once you're there.
Okay.
You have to get CMR, or combat mission ready.
Okay.
Because really, you know, the F-16, you know, all these the initial courses, that even though it's 9 months long for that B course, the basic course, you're not that good at any of it.
I mean, in 9 months, what are you learning? Just the nose to tail of the plane, and obviously the basic maneuvers, because you're not even learning combat flying yet.
Well, you are though. But you're just scratching the surface on it. So like the first like 30 days of it, you're very heavy on ground school and simulators, and then you're also starting to do starting the flights at that point. And the flights that you start doing, you're just, hey, let's learn to fly this airplane. Let's take off, let's land, go out, do some loops, do some rolls, see what it's all about.
How excited were you when you got in the F-16 for the first time?
Yeah, I'll never forget. It's incredible for sure. Yeah, just when you, I remember, you know, you push the throttle all the way up to take off, and then you actually bring it over a hump to get into afterburner, and you can feel. You really, I mean, you feel that the afterburner light, you know, it actually lights in phases, and you can be like, and it's just a rocket,
and
you know,
and
it just
back.
goes, yeah.
I mean, you are essentially just strapped to a rocket.
Yeah, and what's really awesome about that airplane is the visibility in it is incredible. I mean, you're sitting, you sit up really high, and the bubble canopy, it actually kind of comes up and around, and so you know, it's like sitting on like a magic carpet ride or something. I mean,
so you don't feel like you're like strapped in.
You don't feel like you're like in this thing. I mean, it feel like you're right. You know, it's like they almost say like you strap the airplane to your back, because it almost feels like you just have this like like a jetpack on almost, because you can see so much around you, and you can look over your shoulder and see behind you, and so
that's got to be a hell of a feeling.
So it's really it's great aircraft for the visibility side for sure.
Makes it a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed flying that. Again, it's just such a smooth airplane, being fly by wire.
Did you have any close calls in it, or anything close with, you know, hiccups or anything like that?
I had a few. You know, they were some mechanical stuff, like lost a hydraulic system. When, you know, that's in they call it an EP, emergency procedure, where like, okay, you got to get back quick, because I mean, it's a single engine aircraft too, and so, you know, if you have, you know, if the engine goes in an F-16, you're punching out, like and so it's kind of it's a little nerve wracking, but you know, where a lot of the other fighter aircraft, you know, 2 engines on it. And then back in Fort Wayne during the, you know, just a few minor things, but I didn't really see any giant emergency procedures.
Okay.
So, but yeah, back to like the question, like what else you're doing kind of in the B course too. So so that first month, the basic stuff, and then you move into an air-to-air phase where you do BFM, so basic fighting maneuvers, which is you fly out there with your wingman, or you're the wingman for a flight lead, your instructor, and you'll go out and just practice basically dogfighting with just just 1v1, and it's really neat. And it's a huge learning curve, and you don't have the time at that B course to get anywhere good at it. I mean, we're studying our asses off. We're, you know, and when we're not flying, you're in the vault studying, and because things are going fast, you know, they're like, okay, you have offensive BFM, defensive BFM, high aspect BFM. You're like, oh, cool. Barely scratched the surface. And then they're like, okay, now we're moving into intercepts, and we're doing like defensive counter air, where now you're talking about like, okay, it's time to, you know, protect the base, and guys are trying to strike it, and you have to intercept them. And so, and again, you don't get the reps to get good at it. You know,
got it. It's just literally the basics.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you got it. You think you got this? Okay.
You got the concept.
Now we got to move on. And because the F-16, that's one thing that's unique about it. It is truly multi-role aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing air-to-air fighting, surface, you know, air to service, close air support. They're trying to do. They really have that airplane doing. And then there's a lot of different models of the F-16 where they're doing. Some are doing like the SEED mission, which is suppression of air defense. And that's a whole other, you know, course in itself. And so, to do all this multi-role, you know, you're the jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah. And so you finish that 9 months. Well, now you're like, okay, I'm good enough to be dangerous, really. And so when you get then to your operational squadron, so all the guys that I was at Luke Air Force Base with, we all split then. There was a few of us guard dudes, and we knew where we were going, back to our guard units. And then the active duty guys, they find out then, okay, I'm going to go to Korea, or I'm going to go to wherever, Shaw, Germany. And now they are really getting dialed into the model of F-16 that they're in, and the mission of that they're supposed to do. Okay. Really, like, I mean, the more or less basic mission that everyone's going to be doing in the F-16, and it's like a strike fighter, meaning it's going to fight its way in like on a big force-on-force war, like let's say Gulf War. Yep. It was like the first night of the Gulf War, you know, you're seeing all of the assets pushing in night one, and the F-16s are going to be in there. Radars are on. They're looking for enemy aircraft, so they're going to be fighting those as they then get into their target area of like Baghdad. They have, and then they're going to strike their targets. They already have pre-assigned targets, and then they need to fight their way out. That's kind of what a strike fighter does. Versus like an F-22 or an F-15, those are strictly air-to-air. So, I mean, there's some exceptions to that. They sometimes do additional things, but more or less, you're going to see those guys are going to be out there just doing the air-to-air side. And then A-10 is predominantly close air support. Yeah, we do a lot of other things, but so kind of back to the F-16 side. So you're like, okay, I'm in a strike fighter. That's pretty much what the aircraft does. And but then some of them, they all have different. Each squadron has its unique role as well.
Okay.
And so that's when you go through your CMR course, your combat mission ready. And once you get that stamp of approval, dude, you're good. You can go to war. We trust you to be a wingman.
How long does that take?
That's usually like a 3-month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, man, look, we know you know the basics. You need to now get really spun up and on our specific aircraft and what we do at this squadron, and like at Fort Wayne, I mean, really at the time, there was, now we're talking, it was 2007, 2008 timeframe, and so. Of course, the war is still raging, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. You got Iraq in the mix, Afghanistan. You got all of these, and so it's like, okay, we're doing a lot of close air support, but we're also just doing like air interdiction. So it's like, hey, you've been tasked to go just drop a guided munition on here, and then there's probably still a threat of an air-to-air fight somewhere.
So you show up to your unit, and they could be like, hey, we're strictly air to ground here, and then that's all you're going to be working with. That
well,
unit.
you still need to know all the other aspects, and really, in an F-16, they're all going to be somewhat air to air and somewhat air to ground, but then just a lot of them have different little specialties.
Okay.
Within it.
So how long did you ride out the F-16 for?
So, I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm in Fort Wayne. I'm good to go. And then another thing with the Air National Guard is they are like, when you wonder like, well, why does a certain state have a certain airframe? Well, it's all politics. Is what it boils down to. And it boils down to what senators want, what type of aircraft, and how much pull they have.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
that's all it comes down to.
They definitely look at the needs of like, hey, like, the overall arching defense picture, right? Like Hawaii has F-22s. They always had they had F-15s before that. They have always had a very strong air-to-air presence, and I think that's because the lessons
have been learned.
Yeah, Pearl Harbor happened, and we're not going to let that happen again. So they're going to put the most badass fighters out there, and so obviously
what a horrible spot to be stationed.
Yeah, I know. So that's now like above just state politics. That's going to be like a national level.
That's a strategic play,
right?
But
for Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I was, like, okay, we have F-16s here, but they could just as easily in Fort Wayne, Indiana, have whatever airframe they want. And so there was a big shuffle about that time of like, hey, we need to just kind of move around what we want for different guard bases. So a lot of them were shut down, and then they just moved aircraft around, which really, in hindsight, it made no sense.
Okay. Military.
Military standard.
Don't make it make sense.
No. And so they were like, hey, Fort Wayne, you guys are going to switch from an F-16 to an A-10. All of the leadership there, like, this makes no sense. We want to just stay in the Viper and then just move to F-35s was their goal, because that was kind of that was the progression that you'd see. Like, once they phased out F-16s, you go to an F-35. But for some reason, they said, we're going to go to the A-10. And
just
so,
like that.
Yeah, and so I had been back there in Fort Wayne for a little over a year, and I remember, I'm sitting back in the vault studying, and my commander comes back there. It's me and another lieutenant, and he's like, hey, guys, what are you doing this summer? I'm like, I don't know, sir. Like, it doesn't sound good, right? And he's like, do you guys want to go to Davis-Monthan and go learn to fly the A-10? We're like, wait, what? Are you serious? Yeah, like, it's pretty official. We're going to the A-10, and we want to get things going. And we have there's 2 openings for 2 courses, and we want to send you 2 guys. We were both, again, 2 young single dudes. They don't care. Go.
Yep.
And we're like, well, it would have been nice to at least get more flight time in the F-16.
Okay.
You go through all that pain in the ass.
Right as you're getting comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Right when you're feeling comfortable, you're good to go.
That's the military, though.
And then they're just like, pull the rug out from under you, and they're like, all right, you're going to go to Davis-Monthan and go fly the
Start all over again.
Yeah. And luckily, flying. So the way we saw it, we were like, well, this is going to be a great time.
Yeah.
Like, we know how to fly fighters.
Mm-hmm.
We know how to do close air support, and now we're just going to do it in a different airplane. But it's back to a 6-month course down there. We're like, well, this will be a breeze. We'll have a fun time down here. So we rent a giant house in the foothills, thinking we're just going to be, partying and then just go in and fly. Well, we didn't realize the A-10 community, they take close air support like very serious, like to a whole other level.
I feel like it's a pretty serious thing.
Yeah.
Especially with troops and how much.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to say like the F-16 community does not, but they have a lot on their plate. For sure, is what I mean. And they have there's just a lot going on in the F-16 community to where, like, yeah, they're good at close air support and they obviously take it serious, but they're not experts in it by any means, and they will admit that the F-16 community is not experts in it. They can't be. They just don't have the time. Well, the A-10 community. That's their
pride themselves on that.
They pride themselves on that, and they kick serious ass at close air support. But with that, they make sure their pilots, are busting their asses. And so, when we thought we knew close air support, we didn't know shit until we started in the A-10 for sure.
Really, was that almost taking a step back in technology? Because I feel like the A-10 is just a workhorse that, I mean, obviously you know it way better than I do, but. I feel like, how did that feel going from the 16 back to, I don't want to say back to an A-10 if it's a
so it was, it's definitely it's a different aircraft. I mean, obviously, but in terms of it's a different mission, you're doing different things, and it's not it's not this sexy looking fighter. It's we call it go ugly early, get the A-10s. And it's just, but it's like now you're in like a Jeep, basically. I mean, it's just a battle hardened beast. Yeah. And so it was a little, it was a little different for sure. You're like, oh man. I remember like we were saying in the F-16, the first time you push up the throttles all the way, you get the loud afterburner, and it's so cool. And I remember, anymore. And in the A-10, so my first flight in the A-10, again, this is, they don't make 2-seat A-10s. Yeah. They're all single seat. So my first flight, you're chased from your instructor. And so he's just basically there, quiet, just right behind you in another A-10. But you're talking on the radios, you take off. And I remember taking off, it's like, slowly rolling. I'm like, dude, come on, man, let's roll. And take off. And you're like, what is this? And then I'm climbing out, and my instructor, he's like, hey, whatever I call it, Dragon 1, whatever I call it. We were like the Dragons. I think you're on fire. I'm on fire. Like, this is my first sortie ever. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking, oh shit. Okay. I look over my shoulder. You can see the motor. There's just white coming out that motor.
So your first flight.
Yeah. First flight in the A-10.
It catches on fire.
So now I'm just like, oh, this is just great. Now I'm in this piece of shit thing. It's on fire. And I have to shut the motor down and divert into a little drone base on the Mexican border, and and just leave this A-10 down there, and I'm like, hey, I'm coming in, I'm an emergency, and all these drones are flying everywhere, getting out of the way, and it's an army base, and so they don't know what to do with it, and I just kind of leave it at the end of the runway and take a 3-hour ride back to base. Okay, let's see how this course goes. But
this is your very first experience.
Very first time.
That is hilarious. You're like, well, this is my future. I'm here.
Yeah, but so then fast forward like 2 weeks. Now things are going good. Obviously, and I don't mean to knock the hog because I love her. She's the greatest thing ever now. And you don't realize it until so again, about 2 weeks later is when you get to shoot the gun.
Okay.
And everybody remembers the first time they get to shoot.
What caliber is this again?
So it's a 30 millimeter.
30 mil.
And the GAU 8 Avenger. So you got seven barrels. It's a beast of a gun. And I mean, the thing weighs like 620 pounds. It's 20 feet long.
Is it true that they built the plane around the gun? You hear that as
it's true. So when the initial contract came out to build the A-10, they were like, okay, we need a dedicated close air support aircraft, and that was lessons learned from Vietnam. And they saw in Vietnam, like the most badass close air support aircraft they had was the A-1 Skyraider. And and you'll have to like Google a picture of that, because what it is, it really looks a lot like an A-10, except it looks like a mix between like an A-10, like a P-47. I mean, it has a big propeller on the front, but it has huge wings with a lot of hard points to hold weapons.
That was more of an ordnance dropping then. That was their close support.
It was
during that era. They didn't have a gun.
It was just 19. Yeah, no giant gun on it, but it had a lot. It had a lot, again, all those hard points to hold munitions, and it could fly low, it could fly slow. The problem was it got crushed. I mean, I think they lost close to 300 of those.
Jeez.
And
those are the ones that you see the slow video and they're dropping the napalm like right over a tree line. That would have been usually that plane in Vietnam.
It would also be involved in like the combat search and rescue, which is another huge mission for the A-10, where if a pilot has to eject, they roll in with like the Jolly Greens, the big helicopters. They help find the downed pilot. And so the Air Force saw like these are like, we need this, and the Army said, hey, Air Force, we need close air support.
We need you guys that need this.
Yeah, and having these, the Air Force was obsessed at the time with these big, fast fighter bombers. Yeah. Like F-105s, F-111s, because really the big threat, pre-Vietnam, and was thinking Soviet Union, and how are we gonna? And we need large type fighter bomber that can roll in and drop nukes pretty much on Soviet Union. Well, then they had those same type aircraft in Vietnam, and they saw that, okay, we this isn't exactly what we need. And
is that what sparked the birth of the A-10?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that's when they said, and the A-1 Skyraider, that's a Korean War aircraft, and so they're like, okay, we need something to do close air support. Well, of course, what was still going on is Cold War. This is the 70s, and so they said, we need it. We also need this thing to be able to take out armor. Yep. And so we're going to develop this gun. They put out a contract. We need a big badass gun that's going to be able to take out armor, and then they said, okay, we're also going to have a contract for an aircraft. So they put it out. Hey, this whatever aircraft this is, it has to be able to carry this, 620-pound gun that's 20 feet long.
So that goes under. I mean, almost to the tail. Then.
Yeah, you're pretty much just like it's underneath you, and it goes like halfway through the airplane.
That is massive.
So yeah, it's a beast.
So they take these two contracts and birth the A-10 Warthog.
Yeah. So whoever wins, Fairchild Republic wins the contract. It was like the YA-10 at the time. Now it's the A-10, and it goes through a couple different changes throughout the time, and then finally the production model, which shows up in 1977, I think. That's that was the A-10A, and then it's like, okay, this thing is designed to do close air support, and it's also designed to stop the onslaught of the Soviet armor. They always predicted that was going to happen as part of Germany, the Fulda Gap is what it's called. That's where they thought, that's where all the military planners at the time, when they were planning what was going to happen for World War III, was the Soviets were just going to send in just thousands of pieces of armor through the Fulda Gap. And so they were like, we need to build a ton of Warthogs. They're cheap. They were like $1.2 million.
Which is nothing, I guess, compared to now.
Insane. Yeah. I mean, that's also 1970s dollars. I think it's translates to $12 million now.
I still feel like that's pretty cheap for sure, for what we have in the air now.
And it was a different airplane. The A-10 the 1970s versus an A-10 now is a different beast. How so? It is they have upgraded it so much.
Technology, yes. I mean, cockpit and everything. Okay.
I mean, it's still old school, like flight controls and stuff, but, a lot of they've kept everything that works in there, which is a lot of it. It has so many redundant systems, starting with just two motors. That's pretty nice versus an F-16, one motor. And the F-16 is, it's a fragile airplane,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not really designed to be taking fire at all.
Okay.
I mean, you could take down an F-16 pretty easily with stuff that even like you see in Afghanistan versus
Okay.
the Hog. It's really designed to take those hits. Like the front windscreen, it can stop it's like, whatever, 3 inches thick. It can stop a 23 millimeter round.
Really?
Yeah. And you sit in a titanium bathtub where it's to stop, against
Shrapnel
light
or
light
anything?
AAA,
Okay.
basically. And then you have self-sealing fuel tanks. You have redundant flight control systems. So much. I mean, that you can take all kinds of fire.
No
and
kidding.
the thing just keeps
Going,
cranking.
huh? So shooting the main gun.
Yep.
For the first
good
time.
old Galway.
What was so now this thing weighs 600 pounds, 20 foot long, and you're riding it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're doing like 70 rounds a second,
Yeah.
and I mean, those are, big ass 30 millimeter. It's not like the 30 millimeter on the Apache. I mean, it's a lot larger.
I have a dummy round downstairs. I should have brought it up for people to
Yeah.
be
So
able to compare.
it's a beast. And
Yeah.
so, and again, you're by yourself, your first time you're always by yourself in the A-10,
Yep.
which is great. You
Yep.
don't have a backseater. So it's roll in, you're out on the range. There's a target where it's probably going to be like a tank or whatever they have down there out in the middle of the desert. Roll in.
How loud is it inside the cockpit?
So you have with your helmet and all
Yeah.
so it's not like it's like deafening loud by
Okay.
any means, but it's just you just feel that it's just got that rumble, that but I mean you're talking like, I mean the whole airplane shakes, and I mean
Yeah.
like dust is coming up, and then the cockpit, you get the smell of cordite, the gunpowder smell,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, yeah.
Is it a trigger or a button?
It's a trigger.
Okay, so which makes it even cooler.
Yeah.
How long are you? Okay, so here's a question. Now, this was a commonly asked question too. True or false? Will the A-10 stall out if you just hold down the trigger? That's in the, I feel like the enlisted ground community.
Yeah.
That they got to do it in bursts because it'll stall the A-10 midair. Is that true or
No.
false?
No, and really, and it's funny. I don't know where that
Whole life's
really
been a lie.
I know, and I get asked that like when you go to air shows all the time too.
Okay.
And you kind of think about it. I mean, it's a 40,000 pound airplane, and I think about the amount of like inertia.
For
too.
sure.
You have 9,000 pounds or 18,000 pounds of thrust coming out, and pulling the trigger. So it really like just physics says that there's no way. In hell
And you
that's
don't
gonna
even
happen.
feel anything
No.
besides the vibration.
Right. Yeah. You're not gonna stall out.
How many rounds can that plane hold?
Like around 1,300.
How fast does that go?
So yeah, I mean you're shooting 70 rounds a second out of it, and so
I mean, literally, you just squeeze, and that's 70 rounds.
yeah. So what we tend to do is like a 2-second burst.
Okay.
It's like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi type, and that's enough to take out really any type target that you need.
That quick.
Yeah, and it's super accurate too. That's another
yeah.
thing with that gun. You pull the trigger to the first. There's 2 detents, so you pull the trigger to the first detent, and now you've engaged what's called pack, and what that does is it basically locks all your flight controls. So you're not then just being squirrely down. We call it down the chute. So as you're diving down, we like to be at a pretty high angle of attack, or pretty high dive angle. So we're as you're diving down towards your target, now you put the pipper right on whenever you're trying to target.
What's the pepper?
The pipper would be like
pipper or pepper?
Yeah, pipper.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like a gun cross.
You're literally looking at a gun cross.
Yeah, in the HUD, and it's constantly being computed too, because it knows how it's looking at the elevation.
What's the HUD in your screen,
The
or
HUD
is this on your?
the HUD is a piece of glass in front that you're
Okay.
looking through, and it has like your airspeed, your altitude.
Almost like a heads-up display on like a car now. It's
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just basically now you don't have you can just you just look through the windscreen, but you can see, so you're not having to look down as much.
And there's just a cross right there, and that's what you're lining it up on.
Yep. So you line that up on your target, put it to the first detent. Now things are like freezing. The aircraft is going to just say, okay, I'm going to lock up.
So you're
here.
locked.
And now you're like, boom, you wait another like half a second. Yes, this is exactly where I want to go. Pull the trigger, and now, I mean, the disbursement of rounds you're going to see, they're all going to be hitting there. It's not like
Really?
You know, like in the movies where they show strafing, and it's like, you know, the plane strafes, and it's just like across, you know,
Hundreds of yards, yeah.
Like does not happen in a hog, and really in any fighter. But you're not just strafing in a huge line. You're going to strafe something, and whatever's under that pipper is toast.
Are you capable of doing a strafe or is that just Hollywood?
I mean, you could, but you really just wouldn't do that. There's really not a. I mean, I've seen, you know, if you're trying to hit a huge line of something, I mean, yeah, there's ways to do that for sure, but you want to be as accurate as possible, and so it's usually like whatever your target is. I mean, if there's if let's say your target set is like enemy packs, enemy personnel, and and they are somewhat dispersed in the area, and they really do require gun. I mean, you can, in theory, you can strafe all that, and you can still override that pack, so you can kind of move it a little bit left and right.
So if you had a convoy of vehicles, you can kind of get multiple instead of just one blast?
Well, so if there is a convoy, one thing we don't like to do is it's called like 2-target strafe. So you're gonna really hone in on one vehicle, get 200 rounds into it, shift, move to the next one, get 200 rounds into it. Because really, I mean, just 1 or 2 rounds, you maybe get like a mobility kill or something, but you're not going to really get a full K kill, meaning that thing is just
God,
destroyed.
200 rounds into a target. I mean, there's nothing left.
No, and especially when you consider the type of rounds, that are in the A-10.
What are you guys running?
So on a typical combat that we've been seeing, over the last 20 years, you're going to see HEI, so a high explosive incendiary.
So they're hitting
it's going to hit, and then it's going to be exploding also. There is the API, the armor piercing incendiary rounds, and that's the depleted uranium, which is like the hardest element in the world, whatever, close to it. And so, something really nasty is they'll do a combat mix, so it'll be like 3 rounds of armor piercing followed by 3 rounds of the HEI. So now it's cutting through a tank, and then the rounds right behind it are exploding. And so you really
gotta hate somebody for that.
Yeah, so you put like 200 rounds of that into a tank, and it's
done.
Toast. Versus, in the scenario of trying to like strafe a convoy, you'd put 1 or 2 rounds, and again, maybe you get 1 through an engine block, but you really, I mean, if you're going to go after it, you really want it to be destroyed.
Yeah. So you get all spun up. Now you're in it. You're an A-10 pilot now.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
So finished up down at DM, and now after I finished that course, I was down at Davis-Monthan, and now I'm hooked, obviously, on the A-10.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, okay, F-16 was cool, that was fun, but you realize, like, dude, the Hog is just, it's a beast.
It's just a workhorse.
It is so much fun to fly. You're down low, the whole, you're rooting around, looking for targets. And I'm just like, I love this airplane. It's so awesome. And so, while I'm down there, I was originally supposed to go back to Fort Wayne.
Okay.
And while I'm at Davis-Monthan in Arizona, they call me, the guys from Fort Wayne. Oh, hey, we're not going to get A-10s for another 2 years now. We're going to send you to Boise. And they got the Idaho Air National Guard. They have A-10s, and they said that they'll put you through your combat mission ready, your CMR, and then you can fly out there until we get them back in Fort Wayne. I was like, again, okay, whatever. I'm single dude, don't
Needs
care.
The Air Force, yeah.
I don't care. So show up in Boise, and go through CMR, get fully combat mission ready, and and then I was out in Boise for like about a year. And I'm like, oh man, this place is super cool. Both guard units, like Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Boise, they are, in terms of like the squadrons, just top notch. Like the guys that are in them, just like, dude, like great bros, like really run really well. And so I loved being in Fort Wayne, and I also had that same feeling in Boise, except the only difference is, I was born and raised in Colorado. And so I love Idaho. I love the mountains and the skiing.
Yep.
And so so I'm like, well, shit, dude, I really want to just stay here. And so, make the drug deal, calling back, hey, I'm not coming back to Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
Like, sorry.
Yeah.
They were really cool about it. They understood. And so then I ended up where I am now. Yeah. Just continuing to be in Boise and full up, just flying the hog.
No shit.
Yeah.
So deployment wise, obviously you joined, you wanted to get into the action. Did that ever happen?
It did. And it's so funny because, when I was looking back at it, I started that, after September 11th, really looking like, okay, cool. And just naive of how the process works.
Yep.
I thought I was going to be like, okay, sign up, boom, good to go. Here's a course. Now you're off to war. Like, you hear in the stories back in World War II and stuff. Well, obviously it didn't work like that for me. I didn't get into combat until 2012.
Okay.
So, so there's, of course, that war had been cranking for a long time, and it still went on for a few more years after that.
Yeah.
So still got to definitely be part of it.
What's that like? So now, obviously, dreams coming true. You're finally getting in it after
years
years of the training to get to that position, and now you get the word that you're deploying with an A-10. That's got to be a pretty awesome feeling.
Yeah, it was for sure, especially because you're seeing, over the past 10 years of what the hog had been doing overseas. And it's like, okay, this is cool. I want to be part of this.
Yeah.
We always say, like, our number one mission in the A-10 is the 18-year-old with the rifle on the ground.
For sure.
And so it's like, so of course everyone's like, just, dude, I want to go help them. I want to help those guys out. You hear on the news, or you're seeing intel reports of injuries, KIAs.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, this is terrible. I want to go be a part of it. So it felt great to actually get out there in 2012.
Where'd you go? Where was your first deployment?
I went to Bagram.
Bagram?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a good deployment. There's ups and downs really with how things go out there, as you know.
For sure.
With ROE change and when we were there, things were definitely picking up. There were some deployments where, A-10s or F-16s, F-15s, Strike Eagles, whatever are out there, and wouldn't drop anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you talk about severe frustration.
Oh, I bet.
Where there's enemy all around, but the ROE would be so tight you can't do anything. When we were there, it was still some really tight ROE. It wasn't just. You read these books of guys in World War II, they'd see a train and they just roll in and get to strafe it.
Yeah.
No talk to anybody.
Yeah.
We know it's enemy.
And they got videos of it.
Oh, I know. And cool. There's bringing supplies to the Nazis. Let's go strafe it. Well, that's nothing like it is now. And so you have stricter ROEs, and some of it. Okay, great. It's a lot of it's to prevent civcasts, which is 100% valid. But some of it, the majority of it is like political. For this is the way we want to fight the war.
Yep.
So, but so I was obviously a young A-10 guy. You kind of want to just go rage. But we still definitely got to have.
So you ran some combat missions over there?
Yep. So
that was one of our questions.
Yeah.
What was it like running your first? We're going hot. This is it. What was that like?
Yeah, that again, there's certain things you never forget. Like first time you shoot the gun in the A-10, and then the first time you drop in combat.
Okay.
For sure. And it was like I was there for about 2 weeks in country.
That's quick.
Before it happened.
Okay.
And there are fighter aircraft airborne like 24/7 in Afghanistan. One of the main missions that you'd have would be XCAS, in which you would take off and you get a full intel brief beforehand, like, hey, this is all the shit that's going on in the AO area of operation that you're going to be in.
Yeah.
And you're going to fly for whatever long ass time, go to the tanker 2 or 3 times, and you're just going to sit up there and wait for something to kick off.
What's a tanker?
Like a bigger aircraft that you fly up to get gas from.
Oh, you could in-flight on an A-10?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How is, before we get into the combat, that's got to be shitting your pants levels, like just pucker level 10?
You know,
Or is it-
you get used to it,
Okay.
and it's not too bad. I mean, we all have crazy stories for sure, but I mean, it's you know, the air refueling receptacle. It's on the nose. So you just fly up, park right behind this tanker, and then you can actually see the guy in the window. It's like an enlisted dude laying on his stomach, and he's controlling the boom left and right, up and down. So you just park it, and then you let him try to just kind of fly it into
Okay.
it, and then he plugs in. You can talk to him there on the interphone. Hey, what's up, man?
Really?
Hey, yeah. Hey, not much. Cool. All right. Yeah, I need whatever 5,000 pounds of gas. And he's like, okay, sounds good. Top off. Peace out. Go get and then back to the fight.
How long does it take to fill up? I mean, 5,000 pounds.
It's I don't know the actual flow rate, but it's pretty quick. I mean,
It's
you're
cruising.
up there for like 2 or 3 minutes and you're topped off.
No shit.
Yeah, I mean it's just like.
And then once you're topped off, what's your time of flight for a tank?
So when we're like fully combat loaded, you're looking at like 2 hours maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's quick.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you can definitely max endure, you know, which means go up high, pull the throttles way back. But if you're down in the fight, and you know, you need to be thinking, and that's one thing with fighters, you're always running low on gas. That's just the way it is. I mean, you come off the tanker, and you're thinking, now it's the first thing you're thinking, okay, now where the hell am I? You know, the tankers will drag you wherever, you know, or
Yeah.
you're in a certain tanker track. So now you're immediately, you're always planning gas. Like, okay, what's my bingo fuel from here? What can I, because I got to travel 50 miles to go do Overwatch over here. And then I need to calculate how much it's going to take me to get back to base. How much is it going to take me to get to a tanker? And so you're just always thinking.
That's always in the back of your
yeah,
head is just fuel. Everything is fuel.
Yeah. You're always like, okay, where's my out? Where do we get to go if shit hits the fan? Like if the airfield crumps at Bagram, I mean, that's a single runway and it would close. Now you're in trouble. You know, it's like, you got to go hold on a tanker. You got to go plan to divert. So
when you're holding on a tanker, you're just swapping and you're just following them until you need more fuel again, and then you had to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a.
Oh my god.
I mean, really, like if you think about it, like when you're taking A-10s across the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much you just stay with the tanker the whole time, and we're constantly all topping off because you want to be able to divert if you had to. You got to be holding enough gas to be able to get to a certain. Because it'll happen. Like you'll be tanking, and all of a sudden, oh shit,
we got to go.
my jet won't take gas for some reason. It's broken, and you don't want to be over the ocean and be like, well, I have no options. So you're always thinking you got to have an option to where so we're always like staying topped off.
So once the cycle of A-10s filter out, you're pretty much rolling right back in.
Yeah, I mean, you get and again, you have it all pre-planned, so you know, like there's certain areas of the ocean where you're like, okay, dude, we got to be constantly staying
Long
topped
stretch
off
before there's
versus,
anything.
Hey, we're over land. Like, dude, we're good. If we got a problem, just drop in and land it here. But yeah, doing pond crossings is what we call it, crossing the ocean. You're gonna be on the tanker.
I've never thought of that. I didn't even know that's how it works.
Yeah,
That's pretty. Is it? I mean, a 30-minute gap in between, an hour. I mean, obviously you said it varies, but I mean, if you're overseas and there's a dust storm or the base is shut down and you gotta follow a tanker around, I mean, that could be.
well, and really, I mean, if an airport or if a base is like crumped, like the runway is gone, or they're and they're like, dude, you're now thinking divert mode. Your mind's like, okay, because you don't want to just be the guy who's just waiting around. I mean, and an airport, base could be closed for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Now, it's like, okay, a base is closed, do divert.
Got it.
So
back to your first mission. You get the green light. You guys are loaded up. I mean, what's going through your head? I mean, do you know, were there pre-runs before this? Like, hey, this is it, and then you get all excited, then it gets shut down, or was this it?
So really, like I say, you're doing a lot of that XCAS, meaning you're airborne. You don't really know what's going to happen. Sometimes you'd be like, hey, we want you to just go to this fob and make sure they're good to go. Just go hold over the fob. They've been taking indirect fire, and then. So you check in with the JTAC, Joint Tactical Air Controller on the ground. Hey, what's up, man? This is Hog 51. I'm just overhead. Okay, cool, thanks. And then crickets, quiet, nothing happens. Because again, we're talking aircraft are overhead. You got B-1s, Strike Eagles, F-15Es, Vipers, everything's out there.
Okay.
And we're all in the Navy, the Marines. They're all in different AOs. We're all covering different areas, and everyone's you're on that like on call stuff. And that's Afghan. So that's like an Afghan type scenario. There are exceptions to that for sure. Like sometimes you'd show up for your sortie and they'd be like, okay, here's a targeting packet. This is like a no shit. We have like a high value asset.
Oh, really?
Where they're like, dude, we know this guy, we've been following him, and you'd go out the door. That's your target to strike.
Did you get any of those?
Yeah. So you get those.
Really?
And but really, those were few and far between because in Afghanistan again, because really our main role was close air support, which was go out and so the worst case scenario that every hog guy that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up is you check in on the radio and you, same thing. Hey, go check in over here. Or you get the call, hey, there's a tick. Troops in contact. Okay. You go in, check in with the JTAC on the ground, and he keys the mic, and all you hear is screaming and gunshots. Yeah. And you're like, okay, it's on. It is on. And shit's going to get real. And, there's always a level of progression we always do with trying to figure out what's going on. And a lot of times you'll show up and just kind of do like a show of force. And a lot of times that's enough to just break contact. Because that's the whole idea is if they're calling you in, like, yeah, I mean, like, as you know, Marines, you're trained to be in contact, right? That's not like a bad thing. Yeah. But what's bad is when you're being overrun. And so if sometimes all it takes is just a hog to just do a quick flyby, popping flares or whatnot, and just to show, hey, like, we're here, get back, and that'd be enough. Okay, and that would get them to leave. But most of the time, they're in the fight. Taliban, they're fighting. They're not going to stop. Yeah. And so then it's just like, okay, what do we need to do here? And the JTACs then, they're like, first thing you want to know, where are my friendlies at? And so you try to get a good battle picture in your mind.
What elevation are you flying? Are you going off maps and grids from the JTAC, or are you actually looking at the battlefield underneath you as you guys are kind of building a plan, or is it a little bit of everything?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So what you do is you're going to be, so as you're just in your air, let's say you go to the tanker, you get gas, and then you'll get a call. We're all working on SATCOM at this point, talking about all the upgrades that the A-10 has had. So get a radio, get the call, or they can even like send you a text message. Hey, you need to go. You need to proceed to. And there's all it's all broken up into, they call them kill boxes. Okay. So it's just now you have a map and the whole country's broken. So they're not going to tell you like go fly to blah 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 valley. Yeah. We don't know the hell that is.
Yeah. Kill box 32A.
But yeah, that. Like go to kill box 32 Alpha. Okay, cool. Well, I can find that on a map. Yep. And then you just. And then you just get grids, go where you're going, start hauling ass, get a frequency for who you're fighting with, and then cruise over there. And then from there, now you get there, and now what's also huge advantage for A-10 guys is we're big time looking outside. And it sounds kind of obvious. You'd think, well, of course you're going to look outside. Well, really, like an F-35, and so they're so really high up. Yeah. That. Go fly on an airliner and look outside. You're like, I don't know where the hell things are. But when you're down low and you can see what's going on, and so when we check in with the JTAC, he's like, hey, dude, all friendly troops are south of this river. Did you see the river? Yeah, we see the river. All right, do you see our line of Humvees here? Yeah, we see those. Okay, I see 4 of them. Yeah, that's us. Okay, are there any other friendly troops in the area? No. Okay, where are you guys taking fire from? The north side of the river. Like everything on the north side of the river is bad. They're hostile. And we're taking lots of fire from there. So then you're like, okay.
Oh my God, that's got to be such at this point, is it just the adrenaline starting? I mean, it's happening. You're about to be in this, and you're helping troops on the ground, which is, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, like for an A-10 pilot, that is the ultimate mission, is communicating with troops on the ground and being able to support them. I feel like it doesn't get any cooler than that as an A-10 pilot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's our number one mission. Absolutely.
I mean, for every troop on the ground, it's a dream to watch the A-10 come in and just completely obliterate a tree line. And everyone's, fuck yeah, you know, and you guys are banking off. I mean, that is a grunt's like wet dream. They think about that until they're on their deathbed if they've ever lived that experience.
Oh, for sure. And you know, and it goes back to really, you know, how I said how intense, I guess, the A-10 community is with close air support, to where you're training so hard for those scenarios. And like when we're doing training sorties, we're getting to shoot the gun almost every day.
Okay.
So it's like our bread and butter weapon. We know it. We shoot it well. And we're doing close air support. So you can do things. It enables us to do things that the F-35 and stuff, they just don't have that type of capability. They don't practice enough. They can't get down and low and dirty. So
you're way more personal. It's a very personal air to troops or pilot to troop weapon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You definitely feel a lot more connected with the guys on the ground. And yeah, so I will never forget, I was, my first time shooting, it was at night, and it's really hard to get full essay on what's going on at night. And of course it's never as easy as like the little scenario, like, oh yeah, we're 4 Humvees and everything under the north is bad. Shoot the bad guys. Dude, we show up and it's just pure chaos.
Okay.
I mean, it's like it's an op that kind of didn't go well. And so they thought they're supposed to just take down, suspected Taliban leaders inside a village at night. And so and they show up, there's, way more Taliban than they thought. And they're getting shot at from all different directions. Their guys are running everywhere. And there's Apaches on station. There's us. We're all looking, from our perspective now. So now we're overhead, and you have night vision goggles. Well, it's pretty much like looking through a soda straw. It's not like it doesn't turn day or night to day.
Yeah.
And so you're looking through, a little tiny soda straw, trying to figure out what's going on. You have your targeting pod, which is like an IR, that's your biggest essay enhancement tool.
What's a targeting pod? This is on the plane?
Yeah. So it's a huge, think of infrared camera that also shoots a laser out.
Yeah. So you're able to pin 4. So
now you can type in a grid and slew that targeting pod to those grids. It'll just automatically go there. And so we're talking to the JTAC, same thing. Troops in contact. We're blah blah blah. We're taking fire from this side. This is building here. We don't know if there's guys here. We're over on this building. I was just like, dude, okay, hold on.
And this is all pitch black, and you have night vision. You're trying to
so you're trying to build the picture. You're trying to, and then of course, kind of back to, okay, holy shit. Now how long are we going to be here? Back to how much gas do we have? What kind of terrain? Like in Afghanistan, there's like 15,000 foot mountains
for
everywhere.
Sure.
And in the Hog, we're rooting around in these canyons, and you have. And now you're dealing with weather. You're dealing with so there's a lot going on, and you're trying to build this picture in your mind. Like, what do we need to do here? And then it's game time. Where the second they're like standby 9 line, and that's JTACs, the way that they send you all their targeting data. And so at that point, you're ready to. Yeah, that's when it's like, dude, arm everything up. We're about to go hot.
What does that feel like?
You're like, again, we're so trained on that stuff. It's really just like, dude, pull up the
second
sleeves
nature
and let's go.
Really?
Yeah, it's like hell yeah, here we go.
So now you're arming things. Things are going live.
You get your 9 lines. So you write it all down, and it's a 9 line because it's really you write 9 lines worth of information. You know, like where are the friendlies, where's the target, where do they want you doing, coming in and off from, and what type of munitions do they prefer. And so they're like, so we dial it down. We're like, okay, we're pretty damn sure it's this building right here. I shoot a laser on it with an IR sparkler, get him to confirm the JTAC. He's got night vision. He can see that IR light. He's confirming it. We got, they have all the robots up there flying, and also all the drones. they're trying to help us with the, situational awareness as well. There's air weapons team, the Apaches are below us, and they're striking another target. So that kind of pulls your SA where you're like, well, wait, what's going on over here? And they're like, no, that's the air weapons team. We got them on a different target. Don't shoot that and stay away from them, basically.
No shit.
So you're trying to coordinate between those two. And then it was like, okay. And we're hearing, okay, we got friendly troops within like 300 meters of where they want us to shoot. That's pretty close, 300 meters. In relative to, that's just being off target, just a hair.
An inch at your height.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm pretty damn comfortable. I know the start. Cool. And you pass a fighter to fighter, meaning like I tell my wingman, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we both roll in, strafe, come off. And, that, dude, I'm like 99.9999% sure you're not going to pull the trigger unless but you still have it back in your mind. I can remember coming off target, just got a hooded, it's like, I hope I hit him. I hope I hit it. And then, there's that pause. And then you hear from the JTAC, he's just like, good hits, good hits, good hits. Number 2, shoot our number 1 shot. And you're like, okay, dude, awesome. Shit. Oh, I just felt like such a relief.
Oh, I bet.
Because, my first time dropping in combat, and you just want it to go well.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss. And then obviously, worst case, you hit friendlies, which would be detrimental. And so we both strafe, hit the target, and then, roll back around a few more times, hit a few other targets, and ended up working out.
No shit. So one of my personal questions was, have you ever had to run like a danger close mission? Because I've seen footage. I have buddies one of my buddies has GoPro footage where they're in a riverbank, and and that A-10 comes down and like almost lights up they're down in the river, and I'm talking, it had to have been within 50 yards.
Yeah.
And they were all just laid down, and it's pretty intense. And when he was showing me this, have you ever had anything that you made you pucker, like put you on the uncomfortable side?
I did, for sure. The danger close scenarios I was in, luckily I had really good JTACs on the ground who were just like, hey, dude, this is danger close. Here's our initials. This is what we need. Like, no shit. This is what you want, and I want you in from the east. And then they're very confirmatory with their comm, like, hey, this is where we are. Yes, I see you. And then you're being very, very clear, as the flight lead. Hey, this is what I'm going to be doing, and you're all good with it. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, because
run it.
Yeah, just go for it.
What do you consider danger close?
Well, it all depends on what munitions you have on there too. Okay. And so, we'll use like a lower, CD or collateral damage estimate, like weapons, the closer troops are, and those distances. And so, you're not going to drop like an airburst, a 2,000-pound airburst bomb. That would just blows the entire canyon up. Yeah. And so we're always thinking, okay, well, what's like really the, what can I do to break contact on that? So, back to what I was saying before, that's the ultimate goal, right? You don't want the good guys getting attacked anymore. Yep. And so sometimes, just like in a danger close scenario, sometimes you can do a show force, or you can follow it up with like a couple Willie Pete rockets, which is just white phosphorus. So the rocket comes out, lights white phosphorus. We use those for marking. Yeah. And it's kind of a twofold thing. You could roll in, shoot a couple of rockets, and they're really loud. And then your JTAC could be like, more than less, now he has a good way to definitely know, like, hey, dude, from your smoke, I want number 2 to strafe like north of that 20 meters or whatever it is. So, so now we're continuously upping the type of munition. And so then if it's like, okay, you strafed, dude, we need more. We need something more. Yeah. And we're now kind of, all the good guys are kind of moving more out of the way. You're like, okay, well, we can move it up to bombs if we need to. But
how's that, dropping bombs?
Bombs are awesome. The old school bombs are a lot more fun to drop, which is like a dumb bomb, because you're actually, diving at the ground, you're aiming it, you're targeting, you've got to put the pipper right on it. And now with like the latest upgrades, I shouldn't be said the latest, but when they converted the A-10 from the A-10A to the A-10C, that's when they really they put in the GPS INS IGI is what they call it, an embedded GPS INS system. And because really in today's battles, you cannot just be going out and like ripping like 6 Mark 82s over like Vietnam style. It's most of our target, or not most, but let's say a fair amount of the targets we go after, it's going to be like one guy on a moped in a town.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so you can't just blow up a city block to take this guy out.
For sure.
And so we really have low CD weapons or precision guided more, is really what we're after. And so precision guided munitions, you're looking at like a GBU 38, a GBU 12, GBU 54. So those are GPS or laser guided weapons. So you're going to be dropping those really from, medium, high altitude. You're not down low. Because they have to, they need time to find their target
and arm and everything.
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
And so you're up at higher altitudes. You're gonna, sometimes you're just gonna shoot a laser.
Yeah.
And then it'll hone in on that signal.
Okay.
Or sometimes you just type in a grid, and the bomb falls off. It goes to that grid.
Did you ever get the opportunity to drop ordnance on somebody, like on a moped or anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
really?
Yeah. You
You
drop
said like it was a common thing.
Well, so in Afghanistan, I think we were there, I was only there for like 50 days or something. And, you're dropping maybe once every couple weeks.
What's it like when you have this guy, he's lasered and bombs away pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Do you get to watch the impact, or are you pulling off and
so a lot of those, you're from a higher altitude and you're dropping it, and maybe your wingman's going to laze it in for you, or whatever the tactic is. It really depends on the weather, the threat, all that stuff. And so you see it, look out the window and you're going to see the boom, or you're just going to see it. More likely, you're looking on your targeting pod because you're looking for, what's going to happen next is what you're always thinking. It's not just, it's never just, hey, swing by, drop a bomb and go home. It's like, okay, dude, there's, we know that there's like enemy inside this building. Let's say. So you got to drop the building. Well, now you got to be really watching that building first, like squirters, like guys coming out of the building. And now you need to be tracking them, or you need to think of a secondary attack to go after them.
Yeah.
And so you're most of the time you're staring in that targeting pod to really see what really like the effects and what's going to happen next.
No kidding. That's going to be pretty wild.
Yeah. It's but really, where we were really dropping a ton was when like on my second deployment.
Where were you at for this?
So that was in 2016 on the fight against ISIS in Syria and
really,
and we were also like in Iraq a little bit too.
Okay,
but that's a whole other ball game.
Why is that?
So there was like very minimal U.S. troops on the ground. So the mission was a lot different. It wasn't as much about as the 18-year-old with the rifle and just helping him survive and helping him. It was a pretty clear mission of, dude, we got to eradicate ISIS from Syria. That was it. And there's and the politics were a lot different because it wasn't this nation building weird stuff. I know Syria's made a lot of headlines in the past few weeks with Assad's regime going down. Yeah. Well, that civil war, that's been cranking since like 2012. Yeah. And that country has just been in just total chaos since then. And so when we were there in like when the U.S. first showed up, I think it was like 2014-ish, I think, and so they're. Their civil wars in full up. The Russians are there to help the Assad regime. There are so many different factions out there. There's like the SDF, the Syrian Defense Forces, which are the Kurds, who we ended up being friends with. There's ISIS. There's the Assad regime, who's friends with Russia, and then there's just multiple. So many groups of just mercenaries who are working who'd literally, I mean, we'd show up on like an intel brief, and be like, oh yeah, you know how you're working with these guys? Now they're over here. They're now working with ISIS because they don't care.
And
you know, they're just
they want what the money went.
Yeah, they want the money.
Yeah.
And so if the SDF is paying them one day, cool, we'll fight ISIS. Well, and SDF will quit paying them. Now they're going to go fight for ISIS. So there was a ton of just what is happening, you know,
Okay.
in so many of these towns and villages, cities. Really, I mean, like Aleppo and all those that made the news. I mean, they're just war torn, like, you know, I mean, like really out of like World War II type scenarios where you just see is just tore up, no civilians,
Really?
just completely destroyed.
Really?
And yeah, it was definitely it was shocking for sure when I got
So
there.
how are you guys finding targets there? Is it all intel, or are you getting calls? I mean, so if you don't have a large amount of troops on the ground in JTAC that you're doing, how are you getting briefed before you're even taking off? Are you
A lot
hitting targets?
of times you'd show up in the morning or night, whatever time you know your vol is. We're still flying like 24 hours a day.
Yep.
And they would have, sometimes they're like, hey dude, this is like your target set. You're going out the door, you're gonna go strike these targets.
Okay.
Known ISIS positions.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Sometimes you would take off, and we were so loaded down with weapons that we would have to do, we couldn't even take off with full fuel.
Really?
So we would take off, and
Because you're just too heavy?
yeah, too heavy. We just were loaded down.
So you're taking off half a tank?
Go, and then you go immediately to a tanker. And,
Really?
yeah, 'cause
Before you even start? I mean, as soon as you get the elevation?
Yeah, you take off, you cruise in, fly by 30 minutes or whatever, get up to the tanker, and he's right at the edge of the fight, and then you roll in. And you'd show up. So in those scenarios, you'd show up, and it would say, we'd still had JTACs, and they would be U.S. JTACs, but they were not, for the most part, they were not like co-located with anybody on the ground. You know, we just had minimal amounts of U.S. troops on the ground. And so, you know, they could be in a building, you know, wherever the hell. You don't even know where these guys are at half the time. And so, but they're watching lots of drone footage. They are in communication with like our, you know, whoever our friends are at the time, which for the most part was the Kurds, the SDF. And, you know, those guys are out there just, you know, the Kurds are out there just finding targets. They're actually engaging against ISIS. So we'd have a lot of, but we could never talk to them. They didn't have a radio.
Oh, okay.
And so, but they would be able to communicate with our JTACs. And so there'd always be a huge lag in what's going on.
Okay.
Because, you know, whatever means that they were using to contact our JTAC, and he could be in another country. And then he would need to verify what's going on, because he's not just going to let munitions be slinging for no reason. So you know, most of the time you're going to have one of the drones, one of the robots overhead, and the JTAC's able to watch that. There's also, you know, lots of other different just national assets stuff that are looking for targets.
Yeah.
And so we would get targeting information like, hey, here, we need you to go over here now.
Did you like those missions where you're just going in and dropping and then you're out, or would you rather work with troops?
It's definitely more rewarding, you know, when you know, like, oh, dude, I just helped these guys out on the ground, and it's personal. And we talk to these guys like face to face in Afghanistan a lot of times, you know, and like when they got back or before a mission. So that, you know, you definitely had a really good, you know, I also, though, I remember a lot of frustration in Afghanistan because, you know, you had that relationship and you knew these guys, and when you can't just like, dude, the cuffs are off. You just didn't have that to where you could just, dude, I know these guys are all hostile. I just want to go take them out. Whereas Syria, you know, I would say the cuffs were off. I mean, it was pretty much like, dude, we can't have ISIS take over this country, and we need them gone. And the country's in just
ruins.
I mean, it was terrible. And I mean, you know, you'd see all these refugee camps like littered all over in bordering countries.
Really?
You know, because everyone just had to get out of Syria. I mean, it was just terrible. I mean, the Russians are dropping on, you know, I mean, we'd be flying in like the same area, you look over and there's like Russian Su-34s just bombing the shit out of something, and we're like 2 miles away bombing ISIS. So we're all like sharing the same AO and fighting, but we're fighting different people.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it was, I mean,
so you're watching Russian planes bomb, technically who we're defending, and they're watching you bomb ISIS, who they're technically fighting for, supporting.
It was always kind of like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal. Like Assad in Russian, they don't like us.
Yep.
But they don't like ISIS, or more than they don't like us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not a direct threat to the Assad regime, and I don't think, or we weren't. They're gone now, as of last month. But they were, Assad sees like ISIS is a no shit threat. I mean,
absolutely.
Whatever that organization is now that just rebranded from ISIS to the rebel group that took over Assad's regime last month. He was very correct. Obviously, they ended up taking him out, and so for the U.S. to be there to take out ISIS was a help to him. Of course, he didn't like us in general. So, very, very strange though, for sure. I mean, you're seeing Russian aircraft flying and they want to come by, say hi to you, which is unnerving for sure.
Did you ever have any of these moments?
There were like near World War III, I would say, incidents that going on out there of
no shit.
You're like, I mean, if you think about it, if let's say, because the Russian pilot, they're bored maybe, or they just want to do something, and there were some times where they got too close to American aircraft, and American aircraft would start turning with them a little bit, and you think about it, I mean, that could, if they start shooting each other down, a U.S. and Russian aircraft, it could be pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, a Navy F-18 actually shot down a Syrian Su-24.
No.
When we were over there, and it was like, actually it happened right when we got back, and again, and there was like, holy shit, what do we do here? They were like, and they get the call, and then some of the few Americans that were on the ground were actually getting bombed by an aircraft, and they're like, dude, we're no shit, something's shooting at us, and they're like, so this F-18 shows up and just shoots him down.
No shit.
And you talk about a hairy situation, because the Syrians, they have surface-to-air missiles all over the place, and so it could have escalated like really, really quickly. So.
Oh shit! Is there a mission that sticks out to you that you got to run through? I mean, you did what, 3 deployments?
Well, combat deployments is just 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So Afghanistan, and the other one was the Syria / Iraq.
Is there a mission that stands out to you that was, either that made an impact in some sort of way?
Definitely. One in Afghanistan stood out was there was a convoy that was, they were, just moving from a FOB to wherever, another FOB or some shit. I don't remember the details of it. Well, they get ambushed, and they are, no kidding, they were out there for like 3 days.
Really?
And we gave them 24/7 coverage with A-10s, and we were rolling in they were just a constant onslaught, and they had KIA, a lot of injuries, and we could not. It was like too hot of an LZ to bring in a helicopter to get them.
Really?
And so, they were just under constant bombardment, and so we were just ripping, A-10s ripping out other A-10s, like 2 ship on station. Okay, they're done. They got to go back. 2 more show up. And giving them, just being there for them, and then when the Taliban would strike the convoy again, we'd roll in. We actually escorted a C-130 for them to do an airdrop of supplies, just to get them. They needed meds and food and water. They're out there for days.
Yeah.
Finally, they get out. They get heloed into Bagram, and we were able to meet those guys. We all went to the hospital where they were all at and just bullshitted with them. And
no kidding.
So that was really incredible for sure.
So you guys were on station for 24 hours a day for 3 days, and the Taliban was still.
just still hitting them. Yeah, finally. I mean, it was finally like, dude, it's okay. Get them out of here. Get helos in here.
Really?
Get them taken out.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's what there's such a difference between the Mujahideen or whatever you want to call them now in Iraq versus the Taliban. You know, people would ask, and I've never, you know, when I was in Afghan, I was contracted, so I wasn't on the military side, but, you know, from buddies and talking to vets and just people, I mean, I feel like Taliban would sit there and just fight you toe to toe all day long when, you know, in Iraq, and they just spray over a wall or little burst and run. And Taliban, I mean, they showed up to play, and they were, I mean, they've been fighting on the motherland over there for centuries.
For sure.
And, you know, they got those mountains dialed in the way that they can move through them. But the fact that you have 24/7 air support with A-10s and it's still not even phasing them, that's what's scary.
For sure. Yeah. And you know, it is a good point. You know, there are different, you know, like the Iraqi military versus a Taliban versus ISIS. They have different ideologies. They all have different, you know, how they want to fight, how far do they want to take it. Like, you know, just an Iraqi guy in the military, he's probably not like that much into Saddam Hussein at the time, whatever. Like they're there because they were told to be there.
Yep.
Versus, you know, an ISIS fighter, they have a lot, you know, they see it as like a lot greater calling.
For sure.
So they're going to take a fight.
And they're willing to do a lot more.
For sure.
A lot more.
Yeah. And I think too, that's why, you know, you're going to see a different ROE of, like when you're in Syria, like, dude, things have to happen here a lot quicker.
It's so frustrating though. You know, you hear these stories of guys who are like, I had to shoot a pen flare, then do wave a flag. And I mean, we had checkpoints that we were running, and they wanted us to wave a flag. Wave a flag was the first line. Flag, I think it was a pen flare, star cluster. Then you were able to do like 3 rounds into the dirt, then 3 rounds into the hood, and 3 rounds before you could shoot the windshield. And you're supposed to do all of that within like a 50-yard snake barrier to get to your checkpoint. And it just, even as like a young Marine, I was like, there's no fucking way this is happening. If somebody wants to run this, they're on you in a vehicle, and I'm supposed to you know, you had it all laid. I'm like, this is the dumbest shit ever. You know, versus when they were over there, it was like, oh, military-age male with a shovel on a motorcycle, shoot on sight. And then it went to, oh, we need, you know, got to call it in. And I was talking to my buddy the other day. He's a tanker, and he's like, dude, it would take us sometimes 6 hours to get cleared to go live with an Abrams. Wow. All the phone calls and going up the chain of command before it got back to him. And he's like, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, though. You know, the way. You know, just who's running the show and who's developing the ROE at the time, for sure.
I got some more questions from some of our listeners. I'm asking this question because it was actually asked several times. And the first one I read, I was like, there's no way. But there was multiple people that asked us questions. How do you go to the bathroom? And have you ever had to shit yourself? That was a multi-question.
Yeah, it's funny. My kids ask me that too. They think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, of course, because they're in that young age. They think like that. But no, yeah, it's actually. I mean, you talk about some of these sorties. You know, you're up there for a really, really long ass time, and they have these things called piddle packs. It's like kind of a weird shaped Ziploc bag almost that has some powder in it that turns pee into gel.
Okay.
And so you just sit there and fill up piddle packs. And then, you know, the nightmare scenario would be if you had to, you know, shit yourself. It would just be terrible. So luckily, knock on wood, that's not happened. But, you know, there are some stories for sure of guys. I mean, dude, you're deployed and the food is jacked up.
Not the best.
I mean, you know this, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, you're going to eat rotten food and, you know, so, you know, so that's, you're always eating, you know, like you find in the first week, okay, if I just survive on this chicken and Cliff Bars.
Hula bars.
Yeah, guys would just be like, okay, I'll eat chicken and Cliff Bars for the next, you know, few months and stay away from the salad bar and you're good to go.
Yeah, I had to ask because when I got the first one that came in, I was like, I'm not. And then multiple people are like, how do these guys use the restroom up there if you're running missions? So I had to ask that one. Does it take a shorter amount of time flying east to west or west to east? And is that a thing?
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, realistically, it's going to take a lot longer. I mean, if you're like flying like super long distances, it takes longer to go west just because that's how the winds are predominantly in the northern hemisphere. But when you're just flying like, sorties in a fighter, it's negligible for sure. It's all really you care about, if you're going to go somewhere, quote unquote far in a fighter, which would be like from Idaho to Arizona, on a single, without a tanker, then you're just looking at what are the winds doing. Got it. Yeah, if you're going to go like, if you're going really far distance, if you're going to go like from the East Coast of the U.S. over to Europe or something like that, you're going to get there a hell of a lot faster when you go when you're traveling east versus west because of the winds.
Got it. I don't know if you're a religious man.
I am. Yeah.
Do you believe in a firmament?
In a firmament?
Yes, the dome over the earth.
I don't think there's like a protective dome over the earth.
Okay. Next, is the earth flat?
Is the earth flat? I will say no to that.
No?
One. Yeah.
I haven't found a pilot that has rogered up to that one yet. Yeah. But people know, they know my conspiracies and I'm in it. So I had someone like, you got to ask him if the earth, if he thinks it's flat. Because you do commercial too, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're doing long flights. Is this something that you just can't admit to?
No, I would definitely admit. I like conspiracy theories. Yeah. I love bullshitting with my buddies. We talk about this stuff all the time around the campfire.
And you're not a flat earther, huh?
Not a flat earther. And you can, you'll know pretty easily when you start flying long distances that it just
doesn't make sense.
No, it's impossible.
All right.
So sorry.
All right. I'm a little let down on that one. A-10s. Where do you see them being used in the future? Do you think they're going to become obsolete? Because they tried for a while, right, to decommission it, and it's just such an incredible machine. Do you see them being phased out at all anytime soon?
It's actually in the works right now to be phased out.
Really?
And I mean, of course, that's been happening since the Gulf War. Been continuously trying to phase them out, and then something kicks off. Pretty much is the way it's worked to save it. There's been some type of fight to where they're just like, we got to have the Hog. I mean, it's the perfect airplane for so many of these fights. So moving though into the future, the Air Force wants to get out of the business of close air support.
Really?
That's not what they want to do.
Really?
They love, it's almost like they're going back to, the SAC days, Strategic Air Command, where they were really big on huge bombers and big, fast things to strike against, big, terrible countries.
Okay.
And then obviously Vietnam changed all that.
Yeah.
And then of course the last 20 years. And so now, but now that the war in Afghanistan is over with, and they're, the Air Force is their main focus. It's no secret is China, and so everything that they talk about is how to fight that fight, or in any future fight against like a larger state.
How do you think we would fight China? Do you think it would be mainly air to air for a more portion of it, or? The reason I ask is because you look at our military. We've never had a break. We've been in war we roll from one war to the next, to the next, to the next. And then you take someone like China, which, when's the last time they were at war with us? When we were doing island hopping campaigns. So how do you think the U.S. would take on China, if in your experience?
Honestly, it's a good question, and nobody really knows that. I'm sure people have some very good plans for that, and there's probably a lot of different scenarios that could take place. The big threat, that you always see on the news that they always talk about is China wants to take Taiwan. So there's, there's obviously a huge like war plan about how could we prevent that? How could that fight take place? What assets would be involved? Would A-10s be involved? What would it be? And And I think there's so many it depends
Yeah, for sure.
into that to where,
It's a lot of variables.
yeah.
And look how much the battlefield has changed with this Ukraine-Russian shit.
Oh,
Drones
for sure.
And, I mean,
that's been such an eye opener, I think, to just, to the world militaries where they're seeing like, oh my gosh, drone warfare has changed things so much, and how much is that going to affect it? I mean, are we going to see a giant force on force where you're seeing like carriers flowing in and fighting, these giant naval battles?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
only time will tell for sure.
And it's such an interesting way because we almost went back in time and fast forward in time for this war, because I never in a million years would ever think we'd be in trench warfare again, where you're turning corners and dudes are hand-to-handing it, and then they're hiding from drones that are flying into a bunker while they're sitting there eating chow for the day.
I know. It's really crazy.
I mean, it's
and there's
I
so
couldn't
many
even imagine.
There's so many domains now too of warfare. When you look at space, cyber, is things that are like beyond the scope of just warfare that that we've seen for so many years, to where and they're seeing what how those can be used in wars like in Ukraine, and then you also see the way the Israelis are fighting, just really wild shit that is just outside the realm of conventional
warfare for sure.
And so I think that definitely makes it to where you're like, well, how would the next giant war, whether it's the U.S. and another major nation state, you're talking like Russia, China type thing, or is the next big fight going to be something that breaks out again in the Middle East or something? And so
fuck that place.
And really, that's why with the A-10, the divestment of the A-10 is in the works for sure, and they want to get rid of it, and they're slowly closing down squadrons as of right now.
That's such a bummer, man.
Well, it is for sure. I mean, especially, I love the airplane, and I've seen how effective it is, and but I also see how effective an F-35 is when you're talking about when it's going to be fighting, a nation state. Having an F-35 would be a lot more survivable in that like Ukraine type scenario than an A-10 would be. That's just the nature of the beast.
Okay.
And if that's the way the future warfare goes, where you're going to see a lot of F-35s flying stealth, flying high, that could be the case. But
Sorry.
Well, I just always see that there would still be a place for Hog.
That's why I'm saying what would replace the Hog at the end of the day. That is on the battlefield. That's as close to an Angel that you can get.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever, I would say this: if there's ever a time where you're going to see, troops fighting troops, which seems inevitable in any type of war. No matter how crazy things get with like cyber and space, they're still at the end of the day. I think you're going to see armies fighting 100%, against each other, 100%. And you're going to need close air support.
Yeah,
and Lockheed had said the F-35 will replace the A-10. They said they can do that. That's one of their things. Oh yeah, well they checked that container and they should prove that to Congress. Well, but everyone knows it really cannot. It can drop a bomb on a grid, and if they're told to do that, but it's not going to do it to the full effect of the Hog. So
no, nothing can.
Right.
Nothing. Another question that was asked was, have you ever had to make a split-second decision in combat to change the outcome of the mission?
Yeah, I think a lot of, times that comes to mind would be, missions in Syria, where you're, because there's, they always talk about like the fog of war, where it's just things that you just don't, wait, like what's happening here? Why is this? What's going on here? And most of it is, let's say you're being targeted to something like, okay, we know this area, it's got to be, these buildings have to be destroyed. And you're like rolling in, and then all of a sudden, like a random car pulls up, and, civilians are coming out, you're like down the chute, right? And you're like,
really?
Dude, something's not right here. I'm off, really? So there'd be scenarios like that for sure. And it's always, where, you're like, you're okay. You got something's not right here. This isn't just like a full up enemy compound. There's like, and so situations like that would happen a lot because it would be, again, there are so many lines of communication to get the targeting to us that, you see that breakdown. I mean, luckily for us, we didn't have, CIVCAS type incidents over there, but.
Damn. Yeah, that's wild. I couldn't even imagine. And then it's up to you to make that decision at the end of the day to pull or.
Oh, for sure. You own it. Absolutely. You pull the trigger or you pickle off a bomb. It's on you for sure.
Damn. How often does that happen? I don't know. You don't have to say if you've ever made that a wrong decision or not, but I mean, when it goes away, okay, so as a pilot, you make that decision. You have a target that you've been briefed on, and you go out and you bombs away it, and then it comes back. Are you held responsible for everything that happens once you release, even though you've been given the green light on that's a hard target?
Yeah, yes and no. I'll put it that way. Okay. If it's, let's say, because there's different types of targeting that's out there also. There's some times where like the command cell, they're directing you, hey, here's some grids. Go over there and you need to drop a GBU-31, like a 2,000-pound GPS-guided bomb on this target. And now you could be at night above the weather, and you don't even know. You don't have the ability to go down and see. Now, they're not going to give you a target like that unless they are pretty damn. 100% sure.
Got it.
That is a target. They're not just gonna. They're not going to hang you out to dry with hey, here, go drop on this grid, and we don't really know what's there.
Yeah.
So if you get one of those type of targeting, you're going to be, you're going to know that you're striking an enemy target. Now, if it's in the chaos of like a troops in contact situation or during I've 100% happened like in Afghanistan. JTAC, he's under stress. He's being shot at, and he mistakenly will give you the grid. He wants you to drop a bomb or target, and it's like a friendly position.
Really?
And you're like, and unfortunately, there have been cases of friendlies being dropped on, but from mistakes being made either on from the pilot side or JTAC side, and that would be obviously the worst thing you could ever do.
For sure.
And luckily, whenever I was flying and that happened, you would catch it. And we go through so many checks and balances within a 2-ship or a 4-ship in an A-10s. We're all trying to confirm. Yeah. And does everybody have the right picture? Okay. Friendlies are on the west side of the hill. Does everybody agree? No, I don't see that. Okay, hold on. Everybody safe them up. Like, we got to get this figured out because there's no reason to rush into something. And then, that would obviously compound the issue if you're dropping on the wrong area.
And in that situation, I feel that everything is so rushed because you're hearing the radio. Every time that JTAC is giving you a grid or communicating with you, you're hearing screaming, shots. Is that hard to control your tempo in a plane as far as, well, we gotta get in, we gotta do this, like give me the nut, and or are you sitting there like, okay, give it to me again?
Yeah.
Is it
well, you hear like calm is contagious.
Okay.
And if you can, when you check in on the radio and the JTAC's screaming, it's going a mile a minute, and if you jump in and you're like, wait, what's going on? Where is everybody? Well, now everyone's freaking out. Yeah. And it's just, and now versus you check in and we're taking fire from the north, and you're like, okay, like, I hear you're taking fire from the north. What is your position? Like, the slow, smooth is fast type deal. And it really does pay dividends in the end because, you want to be a help. You don't want to be a hindrance. Mm-hmm. And if you're adding, more variables and chaos to the situation, you're definitely
not helping at all. Does that come with, I guess, time overseas, on missions, or is that something that you learn pretty heavily in training by just communicating back and forth? Because I feel like a young pilot would want to get amped up pretty quick because he's there to save the day, and then more of a senior pilot would be like, okay, Give me the 9 line
well,
again.
it is, but there's also I mean, I've seen like brand new guys who just go out and just totally crush it with with that mentality. And you know, when we're flying day in and day out on the range, and we're working with JTACs and they do, you know, you can get some really incredible situations. You know, you get, you know, just in training, you know, where you have real OP4, you know, the opposing force out there, and, you know, the guys on the ground are taking it very serious.
Yeah.
And so you get some scenarios where you finish some of these training missions even, where you just have to get like poured out of the cockpit because you're like, oh my gosh, your mind is mush, and so they really, you know, the more you're put through the ringer on those training sorties, when you get out there, it really carries over.
That's awesome. Well, good.
Yeah.
Glad that. So once you get back, I mean, your transition, are you technically out or are you still in?
I'm still in.
Okay. So what are you doing now? I know you're helping out some veterans in the community. Since you've kind of done deploying and things have slowed down a little bit, how have you transitioned into?
Yeah. So doing the, airline gig, you know, enjoying that. And then also, you know, seeing, you know, veterans in general, but mostly, you know, financial issues. I think you see that a lot.
Absolutely.
You know, and I work with a company called Turbine Capital.
Okay.
And we do, it's kind of a financial education. It's more focused, you know, turbine, like a turbine engine. So it's focused more for pilots, but it's also, I'm a military member. So it's like want to help military members as well. So we do a lot of education, and then it's also a way for people to invest passively in predominantly real estate deals.
What type of education? I mean, let's say, and I just speak from the troop side of things. Your everyday guy that did 4 years or 8 years, got out, you guys will help him set up like his finances and show him.
So I would honestly, for a guy, I love to just talk with a guy about that stuff, because there's so many things that I think you know, like the E1, E2, E3, they're not, no one tells you shit.
Nothing.
And you're being paid below poverty wages.
Yep.
You're being paid like $2,000 a month. And, you know, so I love talking and helping those guys out. And so for somebody in that level, there's really good groups that I can, you know, there's military millionaires, you know, there's active duty passive income, and I'm, you know, good friends with both of those guys that run that. And those are really good resources for that. Turbine is going to be from somebody who's more set up already. But with that being said, I like to work, you know, you can't get to an area where you're set up unless you set yourself up.
For sure.
And so what that means is when you're at that lower level, you've got to start preparing early. And, you know, you see so many guys just making like little, you see the E3 who goes out and leases like a BMW 5 Series.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And
19% interest.
Yeah, and those ridiculous cash stores outside of bases and stuff, like just feeding off of active duty. I think that's bullshit. And you know, there's and again, the military doesn't help you at all with that when they're going to pay you terrible wages, and then they don't really tell you how to get by. So
shit pay with zero education on how to actually save or make money while you're in the military.
And there's so many ways to get ahead as a military member, to where, you know, because a lot of times I get the into these conversations, and guys will be like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm only making, $2-3 grand a month. I can't do shit. It's like, yeah, okay, I get that, but like, here's one super easy thing to do. Go buy a house when you PCS. Do it with a VA loan, 100% down. There's a really neat trend going on in the country now called house hacking. It's where you buy a 3-bedroom home. You rent out 2 of the rooms to your buddies. You live in one of the rooms, and those other 2 guys are going to pay your mortgage. And now you're going to wash, rinse, and repeat at every place you PCS. And next thing you know, you're getting out of the military, and you have like 3 or 4 homes, and you didn't have to come out with any money out of pocket. And there's a lot of little tricks like that. And there's so many of these communities that can help people and help help these young individuals to where they don't just get out of the military and just think, oh, well, I served, so
Yep.
I'll be taken care of.
Wrong.
That doesn't happen.
And especially the farther we're getting away from war times, obviously the withdrawal in Afghan. When I got out, there was the hype behind, got to help our veterans. We got to help these guys that are coming back. I feel that with the way that this country and world operates is we forget very quick and move on to the next shiny thing. And so these guys that are getting out now, obviously there's a lot more programs, but the passion I feel for helping our veterans is definitely fading out and kind of dwindling away. And so in the military, the whole world's evolving except for our military when it comes to helping our active duty service members. It's scary when you break it down.
It is, for sure.
You go to get out and let's say you did 4 or 20 years. You go to get out and they're like, cool, I get to sit through a 2-week class and teach me how to write some bullshit resume and fill out some paperwork. And then there's like, have a nice life.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I think a huge fear and how a lot of people are trapped is because of that unknown. They weren't set up. They don't have a savings. Now they have a wife and a couple of kids in their first enlistment or two. And then you're like, then you're stuck and they own you. And it's hard to be able to do that. Or these guys that stay in and they're PCSing and they're moving all over the place when they could just be buying a house everywhere they go with the VA.
Yeah.
Rent it out, and then now 0% down. Cool. You got that one, and that one, you live there 2 out of 5 years, and you don't have to get capital gains hit on you or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And, but nobody's showing you that. Or hey, you're a Lance Corporal, you live in the barracks. All you have is a cell phone payment, maybe a car. If you're smart, you don't get one. Let's put X amount away in a savings account. By the time you either get out or 4, 8, 20 years, this is what you can potentially have compounded over the years that you do. But nobody, I guess there's probably some really good leaders out there and maybe some admin positions that have the time to do that. But in, a deployable unit, you're never going to ever have anybody sit you down and educate you.
And granted, the military, it's not their job to make a bunch of, make you financially stable when you leave. And it's that's our school systems the same way, right? They're not going to,
for sure.
They're there to build,
worker bees.
And the military is fighters. That's what they want to build. They want people to go fight the wars.
Yep.
They don't, they care about you or whatever, but when you're out of the military, like you're on your own. Same with school. A kid could go through school, and now you're on your own. You weren't really taught anything about financial literacy, and right, wrong, or indifferent. Which obviously I think it's wrong. I feel like people should have more of a financial education, and so it does take outside sources, but nowadays there's so many things that are available to people, and
absolutely,
and like you said, if you don't want to buy a house, you don't want to be a landlord, there's so many other things you can do as well. And I love to just bullshit with guys and help guys steer them in the right direction. And once, it's really neat to see how people can get from just making small changes to where the next thing they know, like they're like, oh yeah, hey, look, I'm like really ready to make a pretty large financial move with like turbine capital and ready to see things like exponentially grow.
Yeah. That's got to be fun to see too.
For sure.
Where somebody's starting and the interest in it and seeing, okay, we got to get to here before we're ready. Then they come back and taking all the steps and doing all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, cool. Well, man, I appreciate your time. Is there any words of encouragement or any message that you'd like to leave to any of the young next generation of war fighters, especially some guys that are motivated and want to be some pilots? Is there anything you would like to leave for them?
Yeah, I would say I think right now it's an interesting time joining the military, and there's a lot of people very hesitant. I don't want to do this because of whatever reasons they have. I think at the end of the day, if you want to fly the greatest aircraft in the world, you got to fly in the military. And if you want to just be in the military, do it. It's an awesome opportunity. I don't regret anything. You know, you look back and you get to meet some of my greatest friends. We're all in the military, had the best times I've ever had. You don't have to agree with everything that's going on in the military or in politics. I still think it's a great deal. And I also don't want to discourage people I know it took me a while to going through that Air National Guard route to fly. But it's 100% doable.
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody says, I really want to fly, and I want to fly in the Air National Guard, well, do it. You can totally do it. And listen from my, how it took me a lot longer because I didn't really know what I was doing. But if someone has a question and they really want to do it, reach out to me. I love helping younger guys get hired on with the Guard unit. Nothing would make me happier than to see somebody pin on some wings.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure it's, especially if you could mentor them, and we'll get all your contact. We'll make sure it's all put everywhere. I didn't tell you in the beginning, but normally when we start these episodes, I do something different here. I give veteran businesses, small businesses, an opportunity to send us products, and guys that are trying to make it, and start a new chapter. So these are actually 2 companies from 2 Marines. I got Platoon Cigars. I don't know if you're into cigars. Oh yeah. Figured as a pilot you are. And so he's in a combat Marine, got out and became a cop in Chicago and got shot in the line of duty. I'm trying to get him out here on an episode to be able to tell his story. So he started the War Machine, or Platoon Cigars, and then Sea State Coffee. He's a recon Marine, and he's actually a local guy. And so he started his coffee business, and I kind of just be able to help promote brands, apparel, law enforcement that sends stuff. That way, if somebody sees an episode and they want to support a veteran-owned company or law enforcement, first responder, so we give them a little thing. So I'll make sure you get to go home with some coffee and some cigars, and as a thank you. Normally we have some bread, but our starter it did not rise in time to get a fresh loaf made for you, but we'll have to get one for you. But yeah, I really appreciate your time and coming on and sharing some of your stories. I was super excited to sit down with a pilot finally and just hear some of the behind the scenes, because we always on the ground it's a lot different, and it's just 2 different worlds, and to be able to get your point of view on it, it was pretty cool. So I appreciate your time, man.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Thanks, dude.
All right, see you, man.
Thanks, appreciate it.
All right,
that was fun.
Cool, man.
Yeah,
I'm excited to go smoke one of my cigars.
Yes, dude, please. And I don't know, these are cold brews. They got 1 million grams of caffeine in them.